You're gonna go with that PowerPoint.
Okay.
Thank you. If we, and anyone has any questions during the presentation, please just let's try to keep it as open as we can. Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me this morning. Appreciate it. The police department is basically nothing really actually crazy with our budget from FY22 to FY23. We'll see a couple of different changes I'm looking to implement. One of them is a 20-second FTE. We are at currently 21. As you all know, we did a on-the-fly ad. So FY22 is we were 20 officers, and we're now at 21. We're using ARPA funding for that police officer to 21. When we proposed to a 22nd officer, I see the difference in the change. After looking at the police department expenses and budget, I'll touch base upon the communication side. Then for the communication side, I'll explain the expense accounts and the capital requests that we're having. When I get to the capital accounts and requests, I just want you to understand the police department has been very, very moderate in regards to anything that we've asked for in the past, especially the last 3 years that I've taken over. I'll show you what's happening with those water asks and water plays right now. So first of all, I'm going to go to our first slide. Basically, the only thing we're going to have an increase in our budget is because of contractual obligations. They raised hourly rates per contract. They settled in if you remember the police and the dispatcher that settled their contract, they're the first two to settle the contracts for the town. They went with a 1%, a 1.5%, and 2%. But that just doesn't affect their hourly rate. It does affect their longevity. It affects their shift differential and their education, etc. So it's not just a 1% raise across the board. It affects everything going forward. Increased our overtime shifts. Why is our overtime increased? We have to backfill. We're doing a 3-man minimum, 3 officer minimum per shift, so that we have plenty of coverage for the town. Some shifts right now we have the 21st, are running with a 4th body on the shift to give extra coverage for us. One new hire will bring us to 22 full time. That will account for almost 4 people per shift at all times. We'll go down to a minimum of 3 if have to cover PTO. So there should be a little bit of reduction in our overtime, but we won't know that until we go through a whole fiscal year with that 22nd officer. So that will be for a year from now that I can give you those updates. Next slide. We touched on this already, where we stand and what the difference is going to be. If we add that 22nd officer, again, it's not just adding an hourly rate or a salary, it's adding the hourly rate, the education incentive, it's adding the shift differential and any other incidentals that come along with it. There's a difference going from 21 to 22. Next slide.
Chief, when you specifically speak to overtime, you're speaking directly to a patrol overtime, is it?
Directly to patrol overtime.
Not any of the overtime that might come with obviously the sewer project. That's all based into the budget. Okay, so
You're absolutely correct. So the sewer project, I'll talk about that after, but it's going to be detrimental to our department. One of the slides prior to this, you see, yeah, the bottom line, it's safety and health. We can cover the police details that are going to come along with that, and we can reach out to the Middlesex Sheriff's Office for their assistance in traffic. We can do. We can reach out to the surrounding towns. The problem is we're not the only town with big projects right now. As you know, Governor Baker released a huge amount of money for infrastructure that's going to probably start taking place July, especially with the bridges being built and whatnot. So our town is not the only town that's going to be having very large construction projects that are going to require traffic details. So to get the other towns to come work in our town is going to be tough. So yes, I'll talk about that. Okay. Next slide. I did a little comparison to compare Littleton to the surrounding communities and towns and as to where we stand. We have 21 officers out of right now. And again, that was halfway through the year. We put that 21st on January 1. Thank you very much. And then I compared it to Groton Air and Western Acton. They both Groton Air are 20 officers. Westford enacted at 48 to 43. You can see the different sizes of the population. But what I want to point out to you is the difference between Air and Groton to us. What is the difference? All of you live and know this town a lot better. All of you travel through Air and Groton, you know those towns. They don't have what we have. They don't have they don't have the point. They don't have 495. They don't have Route 2. They don't have a hotel. They don't have any of those things. Groton is pretty much a better community, 119 that runs through it. And they have almost as many offices as us, provide the service that we provide to you. I'm not going to lie, we provide a better service than Groton. And we are the best in the city. Westford and Acton. Tell me I'm wrong. Westford and Acton, their population is almost double ours, and if you look, they have 48, 43 offices. They have a lot of specialized units, we follow for investigations. So I put us somewhere in between there, and I know I've harped upon this in the past. This is my 4th budget meeting now, my 3rd Super Saturday, and we did have a last year, so 4th now. Anyways, so look at what we did and where we're going. You all know that I'm going to harping on this, that I'm going to have 25 offices within this town to provide a service that really deserves. And I'm going to have that before I retire. But yeah, so I just want you to see the comparisons to where we're at 48, 43, and whatnot. Sorry, I went back. Next slide. So these are just called to the point. You'll see the different years. The last 3 years, even with COVID, we've been hovering right around 1,200. It goes without speaking. The more congestion we put in, the more calls we're going to have for service. The more parking lots, the more services that we have, the more retail, the more restaurants, we're going to have more calls for service. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. It's a progression for our town. But we also have to look at what's going to happen with this project and that site. So we need to plan now. Not going to be caught behind the 8 ball. We don't want that to happen. Next slide. And this is a progression of our calls that are dispatched to the center here. Our dispatch center, again, if you look in 2018, we were at 16,457, and now in 2021, it's 22,134. Every year it keeps going up and up and up and up. And it goes without saying that even with COVID, the numbers still rose higher and higher. We had less traffic on the road at that point in time. I think when you see everything starting to pan out and get off, that you'll see the traffic start picking up more and more. And that's one of our biggest obligations to this community, is to make sure the traffic is flowing properly. We have this typical day shift. 2 officers or 3 officers on at a time. I did this up because everybody asked, well, what do you guys actually do during the day? So just picked a random day and I pulled the call log for it. The reason I did that is I just want you to see exactly what we do and where we're at during the day. You'll see every day usually between quarter of 10 of that shift change. We have a roll call. The roll call shift is both shifts at the same time. And you pass on what happened the night before, what's the day shift has any updates they want to give them that they have. It's usually 15, 20 minutes. They get right on the road. We have a little radar assignments in different locations of town. Motor vehicle stops. They have to respond to accident 911 calls, no matter where it is. I'm sure all of you saw on the news, did a little thing in our dispatch center to show, the abandoned 911 calls, the pocket dials, and the cell phone, how much time it actually takes for us to locate a person. Because we don't know if that person is dialing 911 from the pocket or if there's actually a true emergency where they can't speak. So we do have to follow up all those calls. We're mandated by the state to do that. Again, we have medicals and medicals and motor vehicle accidents. We respond with the fire department at all times to the highway, to 119, any kind of an accident, any kind of a medical. We're usually the first ones to handle the street traffic and let the firefighters work. The EMTs do what they have to do. Suspicious activity, lobby calls, again, some more radar assignments. We assist with motor vehicle lockouts. And then again, we have court paperwork assignments. This is just patrol-wise. This isn't getting into the follow-up investigations for detectives or court prosecution, exactly what they need to find out for discovery and whatnot. Next slide. So some of our expenses,
Some of our expenses that we have, salary reverse expense. In the salary line item, you'll see that each officer is given $17.50 per year twice a year. Sorry, $17.50 broken up into two payments. That's for maintenance of their uniform and dry cleaning and any kind of repairs needed for their uniform. The expense line for $18,500, that is for uniform changes. So if I implement a uniform change, new badges, or new shirts, or out of carry vests, or different things, we own that. We have to pay them, we have to outfit them with that. Any new hire, if we have one, we have to outfit that new hire. The average hire just for their uniforms, we're not talking guns or vests or that stuff, is well over $3,000. Uniforms alone, I'll just give you a quick rundown. What I'm wearing right now, uniform pant, uniform shirt, and boots. Right now, you're talking about $500 is what I have on it. We're trying to change things up a little bit, kind of soften the uniform up, but it's not the appearance that we want to have in our community. Let's stay traditional for that. Next slide, please. Some of the different expenses that we have as well, and the increases that go along with them. MEMLEC, law enforcement council that belong to, Chief Police Association, the deputy I belong to, SEMLEC is our central regional law enforcement council. EMAM, it's our human capital that keeps track of all policies, procedures, trainings, everything we have, keeps track of it electronically for us. Because 2 years ago we pushed it off and we decided to try to get away from the paper. Be fast, by on here. That's another one. It's our new scheduling system that we're using. Again, there's nothing paper anymore. It's all electronic. It's every smartphone. Clock into work, clock out. Your details, your overtime, keeps track of what shift you work and what days you have off. And social media public relations, John Gilfoyle does all our press releases for us. Make sure I don't get in trouble with the DA's office. Next slide. Some of the trainings that we've attended in 2021, attended in 2022, 23 is our mandated in-service training for the city of Lowell, new hire training, defensive tactics. We have we sent a couple officers to defensive tactics instruction classes, and we've also have to do defensive tactics at least once a year. We actually do it on site because we have the two instructors. We'll save a little bit in the end. Firearms training, you'll see the cost of that a little different. We have to do firearms training 2 times a year. We actually do it 3 times a year because it's probably one of the most dangerous tools we have on our belt. I want to make sure that we're not even just certified, but we're also proficient. I've only never happened. Different conferences that are up there, leadership conferences. Pablo Fernandez, I'm not sure if you know Pablo or not, and they both actually just finished up their trilogy. That's the law enforcement executive development courses through the FBI. Jeff and I finished those a couple of years ago, and we had all decided to go out and do the training. Hopefully by this year. Police department expenses in regards to firearms. So, like I said, we do our trainings that's coming in our overtime budget for their salaries. But what does it cost us for our trainings, for our expenses? What it costs is, ammunition. It costs for the different rifle rounds, different handgun rounds, supplies and cleaning, and again for repairs. What do we have to repair in regards to our weapons? How often we clean them? Is springs? Are they in good tack? Are they in good shape? How good to replace them? What's the utilization of it? How many rounds will go to time to replace? That's all built through this. Comes up to around 17,000, 20,000, and that way we have a cushion there. Control center. So the hub of communications for this town is right there behind that wall. It's in this room. We handle communications for the police, for the fire, EMTs, the highway department, the light department, and the water. Everything comes through this. Anytime we call 911, whether it's on the western line, or the Washburn line at 95, brought me on all 911 calls, mobile or on the home, comes to this call center. This is probably one of the most important talks in this town. The operating budget I put in, let's just talk about 26,000. Cyberpunk contract right now, right around 50,000. We're working on a finalized budget for that for the year. But our portable repairs, we hope to get and have to get them. Amazon partners, we place all that in the industry. Portable power, we want our communication center is built off of 4 separate towers here in town and 2 basements. Our first tower is at Spec Pond, our second tower is at Oak Hill, third tower is at Newtown, and our fourth is at Cedarville. Cedarville is getting totally built right now. And some of the towers going up. And bigger round of applause to the light department for us as the new towers are fitted with probably $40,000 on new antennas for the lease. So LEDs taking that out. So, go to the next slide. So, let's talk about a little bit of capital. No one wants to hear this, wants to see this bill, but unfortunately, it's something that's our computer consolettes here within our building are now pushing 12 years old. Our repeaters and our receivers at different towers are again pushing 11, 12 years old. 4 of the towers have outdated equipment that is unsupported at this point in time. We have found some of the products from different markets that have it that have already replaced theirs. I was able to utilize a resident in town that's his expertise to help me get to it. You recall we had $400,000 last year from Amazon. Amazon got to do a Band-Aid upgrade to our system. Fire chief and I decided that the first step we needed to do was to replace the portables or the police and fire and the mobile radios. The mobile radios that were in the police crew was something you would see on a property every day. It's nothing that should have been used for our personnel. I was told that, I didn't believe it. Then I started doing some research, and it was true. So the first capital I'm asking for is $600,000. The reason I'm asking for it now is not FY24, FY25. The reason why was what we didn't use for Amazon money, we used to put a Band-Aid on our system. We had an extra $67,000 or $80,000 left over from the Amazon portal. And I put it towards infrastructure. Band-Aid. This is going to bring us up to keep us on the old style. Yet when we start doing the conversion over, it's going to be adaptable. The $600,000 that basically replace all the infrastructure for $4 and also bring in new consolettes here. Ivan, do you want to speak to any partners in this story?
Just on the okay, yeah. Ivy Gossett, resident, but also light water commissioner. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that, as the chief mentioned, at Cedar, we are building a new water tank. We're going to outfit that tank for both police and fire. It's also going to have a new communications facility at the base of the tank. We're bringing new fiber optics to the facility. We're upgrading at Oak Hill and Newtown the infrastructure facilities to house the newer equipment for police and fire, as well as upgrading fiber optics as well. All that in total is 6 figures of impact that we're supporting public safety in this town.
So what, I know we had an incident
in the last.
So, yeah, and so
what kind of prompted me to?
So what happened, this was on the schedule for the 10-year plan, the FY 24, FY 25. The problem with that is, what we found out with the delays due to COVID, production, even if it's approved today, you tell me, something cheap, we have the money, go ahead, go for it right now. It's still gonna be a year and a half out before we get the products into our practice, in working. 2 weeks ago, we had a major issue. We lost our entire communications system. At the Cedar Hill Tower, we have what's called a Quantar. A Quantar is, again, unsupported receiver repeater that we cannot rely on. They do not make it anymore. They were unable to get us any parts for it. Luckily, the fire department 6 years ago had upgraded their system, and there was an old Quantar system in the back of that shelter. So they were able to pull the amplifier out of that old Quantar shelter for this one, which got us up and running. Again, it's a Band-Aid, and I've been paranoid ever since 2 weeks ago of our system going down again. But I've been kind of giving him a little bit of reassurance. He's very friendly with some communications operators from Boston that may have 3 or 4 Quantars in their back room that are going to allow us on an emergency basis only to reach out to them and get that. So that's going to give us a little bit of time, gives us a little bit of breathing room. But this is something that we cannot just say, we want to have this. This is an absolute. Any questions? That's a safety. What's that? That's a safety. It's a safety interaction, correct? It's a safety net for right now. Legit, the $60,000 we're spending right now to upgrade that system is an absolute Band-Aid. It's going to get us by until we get parts like that.
Can you just repeat again? You said if we move forward with this now, it's a year to get in place.
Yeah, so I know this might not just be approved at the town meeting, but their funding not released until July 1. So we will not see that money. We will not see if this is approved, if this goes forward, we will not see this money. But in your work the following July. So it's a 1 year. So if I wait for July 24, until we actually 25. I mean, you get a whole lot that long.
Yeah, actually, if I could just interject, I just finished a project in Lowell, and that project was funded 2 years ago, and they just cut over in December. These things take a long time. Supply chain aside, it takes 4 months just to build the equipment, and then have it tested and shipped, and then installed and optimized a minimum of 1 year. So if this wasn't approved until the next fiscal year, you're pushing this out at least 2 years before they see real benefit. And the equipment at this batch here, you reach the point of end of life. Right now, you're just rolling dice gambling.
Any other questions in regards to concept there?
Is there a sort of a qualitative change in service that those benefits will provide?
Yeah, it's right now we don't have the capability to speak the box or air. They've already gone digital. I applied for a grant from NERAC that we received. It's $20,000, $22,500. That's going to give us a radio and a tower here in the dispatch center. It's going to just give us direct communication where possible. It's just so one consulate, small consulate that has one antenna out of that station. So it's going to give us capability to speak. This upgrade is going to give us the full capability to speak police direct, speak to air, Washington, all that. So it's going from analog to.
So the route right now, and July, it may be crazy.
That's actually a great question. So you'll see right there, this quote is from July, this past July, 638,000. We know there's been a 10 to 15% across the board inflation. We're using the 60,000, 20,000 left over in the Amazon. 600,000 is sold. We're hoping that we can come in every day. I don't think we can ask for more than that. We are.
Yep. Right.
That's one of the biggest things. If you look now, if we have it both the same exact number now, it's separate. Next slide. I don't, that capital expense been taken out. Remember, I was on the board, so I was gonna ask for 20,000 to replace the Kana. Bojack, our further one is 8 years old, and we're gonna replace Bojack. We're gonna hold off 1 year as I apply for a new grant. And pretty positive on the new grant. So I think our favorite finance, the upgrades to the K9 vehicle and upgrades to that year with that lots of cases. That's why it's not here.
That's happening, right, capital.
But yeah, they got a grant. I applied for that same grant, they applied for the second thought. The problem is that grant covers a second thought, second. It's great, but we don't have the ability for second thought yet. We haven't had one trained. We don't usually have one. Second thoughts anymore. So again, capital expense I reached for the past 4 years since I've been here. Sorry. Every year up until 3 years ago, we've had 2 marked police cruisers. Every other year we've been unmarked. 2 marked, every other year 3, 2, 3. The last 3 years ago, I had purchased 1 vehicle per year. I asked for 2, we had down to 1. I asked for 2, I had 1. I made it work. Unfortunately, like I said, it was going to happen. Eventually, we'll get caught behind the vehicle. And right now, we are literally caught behind the vehicle. The vehicle that you approved last year, Russ, I asked for 2 last year, we got 1. We're replacing that 1. I ordered that 1 the day you approved it, because I didn't think it was going to issue 1 vehicle. We still have not received 1 vehicle. Production of the vehicle is that far behind. Our lots in the area to see, and it's not just personal vehicles, actually, police vehicles, highway vehicles. We legit have 8 marked vehicles out there. Out of the 8 vehicles we have marked out there, we have 90,000 miles on 4. The public safety is absurd. What we were doing back then, we were turning them 2 vehicles at a time with 60,000 miles. When we purchased them in the market. This right now, yeah, this was going to happen. We started doing this 3 years ago. This is now happening. We had 2 vehicles out of service, and with 4 officers working, the scramble of the cars. Only takes 1 accident, and 1 vehicle going out of service that causes us to go down our feet. So again, this is the capital request for 2 vehicles. We are at our, as you said, level funded the expenses for motor repairs. Our motor vehicle repair budget is $21,000. We've exceeded that already this year. And now it's other expenses to help serve that motor vehicle. Just so you know. Next slide. You asked me to speak about the animal control portion of this. Animal control does fall under the health care police department. We are very fortunate that we contract with Foxborough. Foxborough has a full-time animal control officer. We're pushing that salary and still basically pushing that salary. Our contract with them is $35,000. That's right around where we were. It's $31,000, but it's just about night or weekend time, so we get stuck up there. We changed up 2 years, 3 years ago now. We have an officer respond to any animal complaint first. Vet it, see if the need to have the animal control officer come out. If it's after hours or weekend. If it is, then we'll need animal control, then they'll call for it. Otherwise, they can handle it. Keep it from probably 4 hours old. Next slide. And last but not least is our salary line item for $5,000 in the crossing guard and ship within the school. Talked to Kelly yesterday about this. We are going to keep this in place right now. And this may change later on, going down as soon as they- That's about that. The school department shares this cost with it. It's a $10,000 line item. And he shares it, Kelly shares it with me at $5,000. That is my budget presentation for FY23. Anybody have any comments, questions, comments?
Yeah, if I may. So back to the staffing.
Yeah.
She's the new hire that just came in. So are we looking for 2 additional officers, one that we just hired, or just one at this time?
We hired the one in January 1.
Yeah,
And again, I don't think I touched base on this enough. I apologize for that. Due to police reform, we lost our reserve officers that work with us. Police reform does not allow us to hire or to have employed part-time reserve trained police officers. You're either a certified police officer or you're not a certified police officer. We can send them to the Bridge Academy, but they need to have 2,500 hours of patrol time before. Then I have to guarantee them that after. We're not set up for that. We are too big of a community for that. We need to focus on full-time certified police department professionals. That's what. So we're losing that. We had 10 reserve officers at one time. Gone down to 5, 5 went down to 4, and then as of January 1st, we got this. The only reserve officer we have at this point in time that's staying on the program with us is retired police officer, active, conventional, work with to us, and he's full-time certified trained. We just have to maintain his training. So what the reserve used to help us out with, extra duty, details, helping out on weekends and stuff for different functions. We can't rely on that anymore. We need to only rely on full-time. 21 as of January, we use it for that.
right.
And now it's July 1, like that, 27.
Okay, that's what it means. Okay, good. Thank you.
Numbers we have in the budget for the salary. My question is, can you, so one short one, what's the cyber contract for?
That'll contract is about 24 hours service. If our radios go down, the technical work they'll come. We sign the contract, we do 24 hours service.
You have some idea of the percentage of your salary budget, which is overtime, and you talk about what the drivers of that overtime are.
Yeah, absolutely. So our overtime budget, Sean really kind of done everything. So I was asking too much. But our overtime salaries from FY23, we're asking the overtime salary for $500,000. For FY23, my ask is 500. The reason it's we could have done like 324. So that's like what I'm getting. Oh, my ask was $500,000. Yeah. So my ask was $500,000. The reason I got that $500,000 number is we were banking on having to backfill every position at 3 persons per shift. But what we looked at was what we used in the last 2 years, and we came to an agreement of $325,000. That's an average over FY21, FY22. So that's where we're at this point. What does it account for? It accounts for keeping 3 people on at all times. It accounts for any investigations that run overtime. It accounts for court time. It accounts for personal leave, vacation time, days off, and holidays. Well,
The reserve going away, what does that do to over?
What's about how many hours did you have in the reserve, and now how much, or I guess if you take the officers in the reserve, you had X number of hours. And then now you probably have.
so we had a line. So what happened is part of that overtime was for different functions that we did. So any kind of like police chief on the side of the road, or there was an overtime function for the parade or the town cells, any of those functions. The reserves would work. Now we can't have them work So now full-time officers have to work. So when I say I'm asking for a 22nd officer, and why I'm asking that, it's not because we don't have supplies. It's we need to fill up no matter what. And if I'm forcing that to work for 16-hour shifts in a row, you know, the ball right in front of the burnout, I'm unhealthy. I'm unhealthy safe right.
Any other questions, Chief?
Just
Sure.
on the overtime, that's based on if you have 22 officers, that's what you're projecting.
Based on 20 spots.
So without that, it would be larger.
Yes, that's correct. Without that, you check it right. If I didn't have this 22nd officer, it would cause another opening gap for the schedule. It would cause more overtime shifts going forward.
It's not apples then.
No.
You're paying a salary anyway. So it's really only, the money doesn't look much as much. Anyone else? Greg, anything? No? Anyway, thanks for your time.
You betcha. You guys have
Thank you.
I appreciate it all.
Great. See you. You brought your admin, Tim, with you?
Yes.
How are you?
Good morning, everyone. This is my executive assistant, Fincom. She's got graciously tore herself away from her dear-old child. I can't believe it's 5-year-old child. So I just wanted, before I get started, a couple of things I wanted to bring up for the boards. For some recognition. On Thursday, late Thursday, we had a fire at the mill. I meant to send an email to the board yesterday, but we had 12 mostly car accidents yesterday between 8 and 5, so it was a rather busy day. So we had a fire in the mill that was caused by an electrical outlet that had water in it. Fire suppression system did its job, contained it to the room of origin, but you know, and the on-duty crew of 4 people get in there. They did a great job, and I just want to recognize also Brock Fire Chief Steele McCurdy, who showed up rather quickly. As those who don't know, I think it was a town, and got inside to be my eyes and ears. And you know, I just wanted to recognize not only the group, but our mutual aid departments, but in particular Chief McCurdy. It was a little, shall we say, stressful. That's in my 20+ years in the fire department. We all talk about that building as the fire killer. You know, if you're not familiar with it, it's been added on to over the last 100 years. And it's a nightmare to even walk through when there's no smoke or fire in it. In this instance, you know, the owners have put the fire protection system that did its job. They just wanted to say, you know, just a great job. Make sure the departments came to help. But that, and also, if I might, as in my 8 months as interim fire chief, something came up the other day in a meeting with Sean and Gary, and I thought, more so to the select board, I think as you get into this coming May and reconfigure the board, I think it would be beneficial, speaking for myself as a department head, we had a liaison for the board. If each board member, we just add more work to the overall board, but say, you know, hey, you get these 2 departments, and you get these 2. So throughout the course of the month, as your tenure, you have someone to go to, because sometimes you don't, I won't say, the chairman had some other family issues this year, so we say. And it was hard for me sometimes to reach out because I didn't want to. If I had that one-on-one with a member of the board, hey, here's what I got going on, and you can relate it to the board. Or here's a big incident, and the other night, Scott always said, make sure you tell people, tell the board what's going on. And that's just, while I'm here, I just thought that might be food for thought for, you know, as you move forward as a board, to have that one-on-one. It could be Fincom FinCom, you know, I got it, I guess I got into that, get close to the budget, have a representative from FinCom, and sure he goes on to go over things. And there's just so many things that go on, yes, a lot of new people in town, new, you know, department heads. And I think that interaction with one person that just bounce stuff off. Just puts it in my phone, right? Feel like, hey, did you tell so-and-so? Well, no, I didn't. You know, that makes any sense. That's just one. So that's my little thing. I'll get into it. Thank you very much for it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
We're pressing that issue come forward.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, what we,
Yeah, I
on
mean, I know
the
it's not.
receiving end or the other end, of it, my concern is that we don't want to get into silos. You know, one member's fully informed and the other's not. So
Okay.
making it work in such a way.
Well,
You get what you need, but we all
Yeah.
collectively get the same information.
Okay. Judy, if you can put that. Plug there. Well, that's it, but that, you know, it's just, thank you for listening. All right, so, as we get into our fiscal 23 budget, I thought, it might make sense to give you a little overview of how our fire department operates. It's kind of, it's rather unique. It's kind of right now on a model that a little outdated, in my opinion, and how it relies on personnel that, and those personnel just aren't here. But I wanted to just do that before we get into the actual budget. To say here, this is what a combination fire department looks like. Here we go to the next slide, and it kind of goes over staffing. We'll start out with staff. You know, my 3 goals when I met with the board earlier this back in late 2021 were safety, staffing, and succession. I thought that that was 3 good goals to have. And I want to start out looking at a little bit on call volume. So if I go to the next slide, we broke it down by volume and trends over fiscal year. You know, and in the blue you have our EMS calls, which is, you know, 2/3 of what we do is medical services. And the red fire calls. Fire calls are broken out not just by fires, but hazardous material incidents, firearm activations. People with smoke detectors going off in their house, we monitor this, you know. So breaking those down, obviously the majority of what we do is EMS, but there's a fire component. And you know, you look at FY20 and FY21, they look pretty similar, but we were way ahead in going into the second half of FY20. And after March, we shut the state down. I know plumbing. The car accidents, Lord knows people didn't want to go into a hospital because again, we didn't have the vaccine, people were nervous. So on a fiscal year basis, the numbers look even. On a year-to-year basis, 2020 was very down. But heading into March when COVID really hit, we were way above where we normally were. And we've seen that now in the first half of FY22. We're back up to those what we call 2019. But we broke them out like this. Additionally, on the bottom, you see 1,224 additional calls for non-emergency services. You know, we always have tracked, okay, we get a car accident at 195. That's a one. That's what we did. We did 6 calls for it. We did other things. We went out, we did a senior safe, we did inspection. So we started to track, you know, what else are we doing besides responding to emergency? And that's where that number of 1,224, whether it's the fire prevention officer, whether it's the on-duty group. You got a call like yesterday. My propane tank's running out of water. I'm worried, you know, so that's someone calls because there's, for those that were around, it's a lot of rain, frozen ground. She's worried about being killed. Who they call? They call us. So rather than have no, you know, to go out and assist that citizen, not keep track of it, we have looked at a way to work. And we don't report it as an emergency. It doesn't show in our run numbers, but it's something we did. We started tracking backwards. So that we're not just saying, hey, wow, you did 2,000 calls. So how many is that? this shows that we're doing other things. Any questions on that?
That kind of includes like right now, they're in hydrants.
Yep, if they go out to do hydrants, plowing station, station maintenance, like, hey, you're gonna go out, I mean, we take care of our building. We mow the lawn, we plow, shovel, we do all that stuff. But again, the data's as good as if somebody reports it. That's what we try to encourage groups to do. If you're gonna do something, not when we clean the place, but when we do something that's like, hey, this could be something, in this instance, plowing, that would be a burden on highway. Yeah, equipment there, we can do. So that's just something to think of, to when we shovel hydrants and any train, walk through the buildings. Right? Everybody wants to talk. Somebody had enough. But that's exactly, that's what we're trying to keep, let's show what we're doing. So it's not, again, this serves what we do, how the fire department operates. So
That's important, but it's not good for us, but also for the public. They're just hanging out.
they're doing stuff. They are, and I try to tell when I get a chance. You see the light department trucks, you see the police cruisers, you see highway. You see us when you need us. God, most people don't want us. They're like, don't bring that big truck with the lights. And we have to, like a billboard. If you ask for no lights and sirens, you get it. Just don't ask. But that's exactly it. But, how do we be visible? Because most of the time people don't think of us until we're there doing fire. It's not that. It's not a problem. Fire. Because fires are bad. You don't want fire. You want to be able, but you do want to be visible. Part of the community. Go next slide. Thank you. So, what are some of the challenges with this? What this slide shows, and we've got it's back to back. We have 4 members on duty 24 hours a day. So, if you look at fiscal 21, 235 calls were back to back emergencies, and of those, 2/3 were medical. And what that really means is that 66% of the time, there was no one back at the station. Both ambulances were out of town. And our ambulance service transports to UMass Worcester, the Shoulder Valley, the Lemons, Concord, the Low, the Lady, the Children's, through, so when, I'll give you an instance on Sunday. We had an emergency, a child got injured. Because of the severity of the injury, they transported to UMass Worcester, to Trump's. So under certain protocols, we have to go to certain, this is perfect timing, by the way, I didn't ask you that.
Every year.
Chief and I couldn't pull out. Right, so,
That's because it's radio.
yeah, I know, it's radio doesn't work. So here we had 4 people on Sunday morning, because it's the day after the storm. Not the day I had extra people because of the snow, and then we didn't get that many, but so Sunday morning around 10 o'clock, transport to UMass Worcester. 10 minutes later, there was an emergency at the MBTA station. So the last 2 members, and when they transported to Worcester, a text page went out to the department saying we need station coverage for extended train. So what that means is we're going to tone out, we're going to send out a tone and say to all the members, on call, full time, station coverage requested, extended transport. So that anyone that can come, comes and gets compensated. 10 minutes later, there's a second emergency at the MBTA station. While the other incident, when he called for station coverage, I checked my phone to look in the app. No one had responded on the app that they were coming. So I got in my car and I started going to the train station. And I had one in Harwood. We had an emergency medical on Chicago Lane. So Bruce said, Chief, handle that. We'll take this one. I started an ambulance from Westford. They showed up, they transported the patient to Emerson. The Littleton ambulance transported the person from the MBTA to Emerson. As I was leaving the driveway on Shaker Lane, there was another medical on Jeanette Way. I called it Broadway. And they transported to Emerson. That was a total of nearly an hour, and I didn't have a single person in the station except this guy. I covered the tech. And we're going to get into, my succession planning, but these back-to-back calls, they're about roughly 20% of our overall volume, but they pose a challenge. And I equate it to those of whoever, we worked in a retail environment at some point. Some days you're staffed perfect, some days you got too many, and some days you just don't. And you can't project out. You can't, like every call I go on takes at least 2 people. So every medical takes 2. Yesterday we had, and sometimes they're acute and they transport with 3, as yesterday was the case. Yesterday we had a medical at around noontime, a 3 firefighter transport, and we had a rollover on the highway with a hazardous material spill. They've seen me on television last night for those who watch Channel 4, but they had, it was myself, the lieutenant, and a call firefighter. She remained nameless because she told her employer she was working from home and she came back for the callback. And with our mutual aid partners from Foxborough, that's did that. And so it's a tough call. Now, again, keeping in mind that fiscal 22 right now has been an extreme, right? Scott left. We're staffing to our level, which is 4, but there's a disconnect there right now. So, and then there's the station coverage component where we're asking at certain times if both ambulances are out or there's an extended incident, hey, can you please cover the station? And as the data shows, we need at least 2 people. We're just not getting those people back. And there's a number of factors that contribute to that. It's not the town support. It's not budgetary. It's the reality. As we expanded our department in 2013, we went to 2 people on shift 24 hours a day. That diminished the role of the call department. 2018, we went to ALS level with 4 people on shift. The role gets diminished. If you want to be a firefighter, like I did when I started, you're here to serve the town. You want to go do. When I have people on duty, get on scenes, we're all set. Hold everything in quarters. People start going, I don't want to. I'm not doing it. And I can't change that. I need to provide a service. So that's why I'm coming to you today. We're going to talk about the staffing. And when we have a station that's empty, sometimes I call mutual. Like we had one. I'm not trying to go into horror stories, but the week before last, we had a fire on 495, a truck full of straw. Someone threw a cigarette away. As they're driving up the highway, caught on fire. That was on mutual aid district of Westford and Littleton responded. I was the 4th person. The illnesses we happened, COVID, half the staff was on. So I filled in as the 4th on the shift. While we were there, and it was an extended operation, getting all that hay, putting it out to gasoline in it. We had a motor vehicle accident at King Street involving 3 cars. I had just called Foxborough to cover our town. I had 2 mutual aid ambulances into town for that accident. We had an SUV hit a school bus, which Kim informed me of, that didn't have any injury. I didn't even know that was going on. So we had all that going on, no one in the station. So,
And not only in judicial work, there's also the business phone calls, which then come over to dispatch from the station. So all these times we only have people coming back 18% of the time, you're having business phone calls, people trying to schedule inspections that dispatch is not having to handle. So it's adding an extra burden onto them when we don't have any station as well.
yeah, and again, in looking at the last, our on-call membership, when I joined in 2000, we had 63 call members. We had 3 full-time people, including plus a chief. But the town was there. As Cindy and I worked on a couple of years ago when she fired Scott, we got talking about the cost of living in Littleton. I know it's near to her. Right on television. See, I gave her that. But even the people we hire, they are well compensated. We are not below here for all the fire. But when they want to live here, I have 2 firefighters out of 14 present, 2 possible hires coming up. The 14 that I have on staff now, 2 live in town. 1 has childcare responsibility. So during the day, I don't expect him to come back because he's got 2 little children, so that. And then I have 3 that live in air, 1 in Shirley, Leominster, Westminster, Ashburnham, Westboro, Brimfield. That's and they just can't come back. We don't talk about going east, no one lives that way. They are, you know, so when they get ready to buy, they're going, and it's tough. You know, they want to live here. But, so and then my call membership, I mean, all we have to do is look at what's being built in town. And these, you know, the $1 million house on Goldsmith Street or 5 of them, they don't want to be called by. You know, there's a training obligation, you know, so, and the call department, though it's near and dear to my heart, isn't the answer. So I'm just trying to point out, I'm not trying to make anything up. The call members that are still active, they're a great asset, and they bail us out a lot. It's just an unrealistic expectation to always rely on. So that's why I wanted to look at some of the challenges. Judy, you can go to the next slide, please. Now we get into a little bit of how we fill shifts. So, you know, Chief Bernard alluded to his order ins. Our order ins, so what we have is 4 in a shift. And if the shift is vacant, or at this point I have 2 members, I'm short 2 full-time. We do have 2 people hired, they haven't started yet. So on that particular, I have 2 shifts that I have to bring in a 4th, 2 out of every 8 days. So that overtime gets posted. If somebody takes the overtime, great, it's time and a half. If no one takes the overtime, they are ordered in on a rotating list. They get paid double. They can't refuse an order in or they lose their job. But that's how I keep the department staffed. And what this graph, what the table shows is, you know, you can see in fiscal 19 and 20, what we had there was we hired 6 new people. So they don't, as a new employee, they don't have a lot of vacation. They don't have a lot of sick time. So they're coming into those shifts more or less. And then as you progress through and you get to FY21, we saw an increase in orders. And as part of that 4-person rotation on shift, one of them has to be a paramedic. That's our license agreement for the ambulance. We can work with 1 paramedic in the back of the ambulance versus some communities that have to have 2. But each shift of the 4, one of them has to be a paramedic. So that's why we see the increase in FY21 is as people come and go, and if a paramedic leaves, that puts the burden on the other paramedics. And we've been able to, since 18, at times, have 2 paramedics on each shift. And then with people that come and go, it's not that frequent, but when a paramedic, the paramedics in the fire service are very able to leave and go to another department versus a firefighter EMT case. Those jobs are not as plentiful as the paramedic. So they get to move over. So in this case, as we get to the beginning, you know, as we show on the bottom of FY22, we had some extenuating circumstances in this particular fiscal year. So with the retirement of the chief and starting out on July 1st, I had 2 members that utilized the FMLA at the time, and a 3rd who had an out-of-work injury. And by the 2nd week of July, I had a 4th employee who had to take some time off. And the 4th employee came back in the beginning of August, but those other 3 were out. The 2 on FMLA were out for 12 weeks, came back in early September. The out-of-work injury was November. So as you can imagine, during the summer, people want to do things besides, you know, utilize vacation. I'm having to order in to fill shifts. So I'm ordering, and again, and we're short the chief position, which when the chief and I work administrative as deputy at the time. Sometimes I would say like Friday, I might say, don't order anybody in for Friday, I'll be home. We do that to manage our budget, our overtime budget. That was what, and the burnout. It's keeping, you know, these employees, especially the paramedics, where if of those 4 people I had up in July, 3 were paramedics out of the 8. And of the 8, 1 of them hasn't been checked up. He has to be a brand new paramedic. It takes a year for them to work by themselves. So I had 4 paramedics that I was constantly saying, I had to move people to a different shift. So we had a lot of strain on ordering. And that's, but again, we're getting to why our fiscal 23 budget, we're trying to address that in some respects. So Did I get all that? Okay, all right, next slide, please. So looking ahead, for FY '23, we are requesting that the position of fire prevention be filled. The fire prevention position is a union position. When we went in 2018, when we went to the paramedic level and added, we went to 4 people on the shift. In order financially to make the model work, I volunteered to take on fire prevention as the fire chief, with the caveat that at some point when budget allowed, we fill. So I'm entering my 5th year as the fire prevention officer, and it's a full-time job that requires a lot of training. I'm a credentialed fire prevention officer. I saw to it that if I'm taking on responsibilities, I want to make sure that I'm doing the job correctly, which involves I have to do the trainings, but ultimately, fulfilling the fire prevention position does 2 things. One, it gives us a 5th person during the day. So now we have that back-to-back medical, and now there's the chief, myself, and the fire prevention officer. Secondly, if one of the 4 on shift is out sick, has a vacation, has a training scheduled for the day shift, what we consider the day shift 7 to 5, the fire prevention officer slides into that position, and I don't order anyone, provided it's not a paramedic. I need a paramedic. So in essence, I can reduce my ordering and my overtime by sliding that person into that shift. But ultimately, the coming change to the town common, right? And it's gonna change. I know right now everybody's looking across the street and 550 change. The sewer is gonna change that entire stretch of the road. And that's gonna be plan reviews, inspections, phone calls, and that is gonna make that job. In addition, the rest of the town isn't just gonna stop. People are gonna sell their houses, put in new oil, they're gonna do all that. So that's why we're looking, we have the for 23, because this is part of the succession plan. What Scott's retirement showed is that we're a growing department, but the burden all fell to one person. And what we want to build over the next 3 fiscal years is if the chief retires, if the chief gets ill and can't work, or the deputy retires or leaves, or gets ill and can't work, we'll have a succession plan by the time things are cooking up in the middle of town that says, that's okay, this person can do this job, this person can do this job, and one person doesn't. That's the point. Yeah, next slide, please. So what is it? I'm sorry. Yep.
So the fire prevention, it's at the lieutenant level as far as pay.
Hey, yep.
Was it negotiated to be part of the union? Or
It was always part of the union. The union agreed to let the
you did the duties though.
The union agreed in 2017 to allow the chief to assign the deputy to fire prevention temporarily. So it's in the collective, I'm sorry, it's in the collective bargaining agreement that the chief can assign the deputy temporarily to that position. And we made it a lieutenant's grade so that the person that gets put in that position doesn't decide to leave and go back to be a firefighter. Yeah. Because you don't want turnover. It's not a sought after position in fire service. You can imagine someone who's like, I want to put fires out. Hey, guess what you're doing? You're making sure we don't have it. But it's I found it, when I started my career in 2008 as a full-time firefighter, I was the junior man. And anytime the fire prevention officer every spring threatened to give it up, it would have been mine. And what did I want to do? I wanted to go put fires out. I wanted to do the firefighter stuff. And now that I've done it for 5 years, it's me. I'm different, especially caffeinated. I get to know what's going on in town. Because all the plans come through me. I get to go out and meet the nicest people that are moving out of town. You know, I always say when you meet, like, it's too bad you're moving. You seem pretty nice, but you know, you're out. And I tell them, I'm like, guys, you have something to do every day. Every day. Phone calls, plans, questions, inspections. It's to me, look at it versus it sprinkles, it's not. You're on top of everything. You know? And then when you're not, I'm like, how did that one slip by? But you know, so that I look at it, I've enjoyed my 5 years. It's just I can't do everything. And that's what I've been trying to. It's a hard because we could say we do it like when I took over as interim, we said inspections, we move them down to 3 days instead of every day. And the phone calls are sometimes Saturdays. That's all. But the union agreed to let the chief fill it, or assign it.
Can I ask a question on that
Yes.
too? But you said that the private pension officer can move into a shorter person
Yep.
on the floor. Does the collective bargaining agreement allow that for the same pay, or is it additional cost to do that?
No, they get, they're part of the collective bargaining agreement, so they're held to the same status. Yeah, it's not like a change in work conditions. They're being hired and your job description says you will respond to emergency medical, all that stuff. So it's their job description.
So they're a firefighter, is what that position is. They're just assigned the work of fire prevention. So it's a
So
class
you
of
can
firefighter.
reassign.
Yeah.
They're just
But they
not-
wouldn't ever be considered the lieutenant, the commander on the scene.
They could,
Like, they could be, okay, that's really.
But they're not regularly in charge of shift like the other.
that's it. It's again, the title, the rank was to prevent turnover.
Yeah.
Prevent, because then it's like, now you gotta start again with the building. All the time. All the time. That's the idea behind it. So the compensation is there. Because prior to that, it was a one grade change. They went from a grade 7 to a grade 8 to be fire prevention. And then they didn't like it. The following spring, they just said, I'm good. I want to go back to shift. And probably collect the fire agreement. There was no help. Unless they were the junior person on the department. You don't want the brand new person. You're looking for something. I strongly believe it's funded and approved that we'll post it outside the department. I think there are people outside the department. Maybe candidate wants to be opposite people inside, but I think it's people outside the department. It's nothing. Schedule, doing day area more, if they're at a point in their life that they don't want to do, they got all night, do this job. Yes, required to work overtime, running the same part of the collective bargaining, it's important to the lifestyle.
So assuming you work on.
Yep.
You mentioned that you've gone through the certification.
Yep.
You trained yourself. Is the cost of certification that included in the budget? Sorry, Phil.
You're gonna have, so when you put these jobs, when you post these jobs, it's required. Right? So in this instance, you will not hire anyone who needs to go to the fire academy for 10 weeks. You have to be a requirement. Fire prevention officer 1, which is the first certification of professional position, they'll have to obtain that. So that requires it's 5 classes. So over 5 weeks, 1 day a week, they will get that delivery certification. The Fire Prevention Association, which has a monthly meeting, that gets their credits and things of that nature. But no, it won't be like, oh, I gotta send them to Stowe for 10 weeks. That will not do it. We're not doing that. This person has to have experience. As a fire, the minimum qualifications of EMT basic, preferred would be a paramedic. Then,
Also, those prevention classes are all done on their regular shift, so we wouldn't be paying them overtime between the classes. We wouldn't have to pay addition to those classes. And the collective bargaining agreement also allows for 16 hours of outside education. So if they found some specialized class that they wanted to go take on a Saturday or a Sunday, they could go do that and it would still be within our budget because it's part of the CPI.
and also, when I started, yeah, the former fire prevention officer is still there, but now he's working a 24-hour schedule, so every couple of days I can pick his brain. If this person has a class or is out, so there's because I'm not giving my credentials, that's not what there's too much time. It's so that I think there's a benefit there as well, is that it's not going to be, oh, he's not in today, you'll have to wait till tomorrow. Hey, go, Chief Clancy, Chief Wantako, and I can do that. And I do want to stay involved in that. It's just, the bigger thing is, it adds a layer of staffing during the day, and it cuts down on my.
And it improves the service of the town, because right now, if he's out, we don't have it. So we have to say, oh, I'm sorry, he's not coming in until Tuesday. And then you have to have his contractors waiting a week or a weekend to get an answer. Whereas now, if he's out or the Red Cross is up, there's always someone there that can help out.
If I may, Mr. Chair. So, who fills in for the administrator for Kim when you're on vacation?
I don't take it.
I'm just looking at
That's
the
what she's here
whole,
with me.
right, so I'm just looking at the whole organizational chart and succession planning and everything, but I see a gap.
Mhm.
Especially since clearly it's a very important department and your role is very important. So I feel like we need to maybe look at that going forward.
We do, I am working with Ashley Card over at Highway for as far as like payroll and account processing to be able to have some redundancy there because as of right now, there isn't any. So we're working together to try to fill in some of those gaps.
Right, and as far as answering the phone, so taking calls, whatever, those go to the call center when you're not available or?
So if there's someone in the station, then they would handle the phone call.
Okay,
If there's no one in the station, they go to the call center just because they might get an emergency call more often than not. People call and say, there's smoke in my living room. Should you guys come down and check this out?
No lie.
Like, you should probably call 911, but sure, we'll come check it out. So that's why they do have to go somewhere other than a voicemail.
okay,
But if there's someone in the station, they will answer the phone.
okay.
Also, so there's a comment from town administrator Anthony Selbrd.
Yeah, and Steve can probably attest to this. When those positions created, Kim's and Heather's, that they were supposed to be backing each other up. That was supposed to be that. That was the role that was created, Steve, correct, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But really no one takes place. But, yeah, so here's a little bit more of fire prevention, just touching on what I've already talked about of how they'll fill in more or less. I mean, in addition, and again, just to reiterate, fiscal 22 has been, you know, this is an anomaly. Even when we brought the budget first with Alicia and Sean, you know, we had more in overtime, for instance. And she's like, no, that's just for this year. And it's been, we're hanging in. We're still working. But we also went ahead and we increased our permit fees on smoke and CO inspections. All the fees are governed by Mass state laws to the max you can charge for what this is. But for, you know, we were behind the area communities for many, many years, and I fixed that this year. So you get 49, not 50. You know? But that's, so we're just showing, you know, so that the fees we get, be it for, in essence, propane tank, propane storage, oil, furnace or tank, smoke and COs, fire alarm system. So like, say for instance, when the point was going in, fire alarms, every building has a fire alarm, has a sprinkler, 50 for the fire alarm, 50 for that. When construction slows, then those permits aren't coming in. Can we go to the next slide, Jude? But when COVID hits and everybody's selling their house, your smoke and CO fees go up in your inspection. So every house that's sold in the Commonwealth is required to have a smoke and CO inspection by the fire department and a ticket, a piece of paper. So those have to be done. We've also, since last year, the newest thing is finishing in the basement. That's primarily, not a lot, you know, Durkee Farms is done, Cooper Farms is done, Weber, Bluebird Way. So we're seeing less of new home inspection versus finished basements in these houses now. So those also require a smoke and CO inspection, but they're not charged a fee because they're charged a building permit. I personally think they should be charged $50 when they've already paid thousands to the so, but that's pretty much how the volume for that point. Yeah, it just smoke and COs last year were just wow. You know, I wish I raised the fee the year before. You know, but no one saw that coming. You know, but that's next slide, Jude. And then succession. You know what, Judy? Can we go to that capital first? Sorry, we just got to pop up the capital. So now as we get into the budget, I just wanted to start with capital. Our capital last year we didn't have many capital items, or we didn't bring forth any capital items to the boards. But we were able to, in September, order a new ambulance. And that ambulance, unlike the chief of police group, I got that ambulance, came in a week ago. It came in the last week of January, which I was anticipating like he was, it was gonna be the summer. So that one caught me in left field. But, so the beginning of March, we should have the new ambulance in service. But for this upcoming capital request for this year, we are requesting to replace our service truck, which we use car 11. It's a 2010 3/4 ton pickup truck that we plow with, that we respond to emergencies with. It tows our emergency response trailer, with our hazmat trailers, any of the other local volunteer corps. When this truck was purchased, was donated by a very local benefactor who has passed. So she donated the money in 2009, purchased the truck through that money. And it was used as the fire prevention truck up until 2018. So it's got a lot of corrosion. It's, I won't call it banner time for General Motors back then. It's just falling apart. So we're looking to do today. We want to replace this because, again, as I mentioned earlier, we maintain the property, we plow, but also I believe that it should be more than just a service truck. So I requested the $70,000 to put on an aluminum flatbed body, which will enable us to add toolboxes and a slide-in Border Street pump unit. And it's a backup to our second brush truck, utilized to go off-road versus soon be $800,000 fire trucks. We have a repurposed military vehicle that we put forth to the town for about $30,000. But last spring, we had a mechanical issue with it, and then you look around a beautiful building and go, we don't have a brush truck. So it would be a multi-purpose truck. That sliding pump would come off in the winter, and we plow with it, but it would give us the ability to have more than just a pickup truck.
Also, the truck doesn't just plow the station. It responds to truck the ambulance. There's no storm stuff. You get into people's driveways.
Any questions?
Yep. When you talk about the brush truck, is that brush truck not served at all
No, it's always in service, but the brush truck we have now, it's not like you wouldn't take it to a structure fire. It doesn't get used in the winter. It's not, say we had a 3 feet of snow. That would be a truck we could go out in, but it's not, it's kind of single purpose. We just have to set up to go to brush fire. So between March and June, it gets utilized, and sometimes in the fall, depending on how dry it is. But for the most part, it's one dimensional. And that's why I said rather than just get a pickup truck for a little extra money, put a flatbed on the back, and I have an idea how I can purchase a sliding unit. So it's something that goes in, but then when the winter comes, we take it off. Kind of like what we did with our UTV is the pump unit we use in the spring, and the brush when the winter comes, we take it off. Because we water and ice and cold. So that's why this would come out of the truck for the winter and go back in the spring. Does that answer?
Yeah, I just didn't understand. I said it was still out, the other machine still out of service.
No, it's just when it is. So like last spring, it was down for a week. It's a 2002 military vehicle, and I have a guy in Boxford that can fix it for me. But I was, when you just think we only use it spring, it's fine. And it just broke down, and then we go, well, I really don't have another off-road vehicle besides the big fire. That's not a good plan. So that I just thought with this, the need to replace the truck, how can we make it dual purpose versus just single dimensional?
What would be worse single dimensional? What's the $70,000 does not include the slide-in unit?
No, I looked at the sliding units aren't expensive, and I thought I'd look at that as, okay, either can we get that within the budget at the end of the year type of thing, or might there be another way to purchase that?
So it is worth noting that the difference between the flat body truck and a regular truck is $6,000.
All right, so 1 for 1. If we replace the truck for a light truck,
It would be
current model year, it would be.
$4,000.
Yeah.
So for an additional $6,000, you can create a whole purchase vehicle to be have a potential to be a different vehicle. with the additional.
So let's be honest with you, military 2002 vehicles,
No, I mean, it's a great truck. I mean,
We don't use it in the spring, a lot of things, like, the water expenses.
Yeah, no, I don't figure out if something happens.
what really,
Crowdy Woods.
we can't really, this truck needs to be replaced, and we need a one-time, we're requesting a one-ton truck because it's not feasible to keep it on. It's just right, it's just look at the inside of it, it's falling apart. It's been on the capital plan for a couple of years now. Any other? Next. And then secondly, we have a new ambulance, it should be there in March. I'm requesting money to paint my 2013 ambulance. Back in 2011, when we purchased our first Type 1 ambulance, the following year we purchased another. So I'm trying to look at capital expenses and say, instead of back-to-back, I need 320 this year, I need 350 next year for another one. If I go and paint this, because body-wise, I've got a lot of corrosion, and the Office of Emergency Management Medical Services that certifies our ambulance will fail. So if I can take this, which has an updated suspension system, updated patient loading system, paint it, get 2 more years out of it, and then our ambulance comes saying 2025, we're not taking a big capital hit between back-to-back years. And so I've had a quote for paint, I've looked into wrapping the vehicle, and if the money's appropriated, I'll find the pricing of both. To wrap the vehicle requires the rot to be repaired. So I have to go and do body work. And right now, the gentleman I asked, and I did not get a quote because the question came up this week, but I did. One of the things with the wrap, 2 things with the wrap. Price of vinyl is very expensive right now, but I would wait both. But if the money's approved, I would look at both. I got a quote for budgetary purposes to repaint the end. A wrap, one of the downsides to the wrap is the person pointed out is severe use. He said I've wrapped police cruisers, and the problem has been they put their briefcase on the trunk, or they take a prisoner, put them on the trunk, and rip the vinyl, and then it blisters. But that being said, this buys us two more years, 2.5 more years before we have to replace it, which served as the secondary ambulance. That was my plan, saying, let's repaint it for not a lot of capital money and keep it in service, and then in FY24, because I think we're going to run into even next fiscal year. It's going to take a while to get this stuff. So, any questions on that? Okay. And lastly, we're looking to replace. We'd like to purchase and add a new chief's vehicle. Right now, presently, the chief's vehicle is a 2015 Police Interceptor, and there is a 2008 Tundra pickup truck. That's the deputy chief's vehicle. The town has been blessed for the last 7 years to have a chief and deputy that live in town. That's probably not going to stay that way. So, but in essence, the plan would be we order a new Police Interceptor style vehicle, and after town meeting, if it's approved, and you approve the budget, when that vehicle comes in, the new chief gets that, deputy gets the Police Interceptor, and fire prevention takes this vehicle. Next year, we have in our plan to add another command vehicle, at which point the deputy gets a new vehicle, and the fire prevention officer gets the current police officer. The fire prevention person will not be taking a vehicle home, but during the day to do the inspections, they do that. I don't wish to have a brand new one-time pickup truck be the primary vehicle for the fire prevention person, but that's why we're requesting a new chief's vehicle. Any questions? That's my capital for this year. And Judy, I'm sorry, go back to the other one. Let's start off with kind of like getting into as we do our capital plans out to 10 years. I did a couple of organizational charts just to show where my succession plan is going. So next fiscal year, my plan would be to ask for a a full-time captain. So again, as I spoke to earlier, what this last 8 months has shown is that we don't have the people in place. If we lose someone at the top, how do we spread that responsibility out? And also keeping in mind, as I try to be looking at revenue stream into the town, know what's possibly coming, but it's not here yet. So coming in and saying, I need 4 more people on a shift, but we don't have the revenue to support it. I'm looking at, let me build my management team. And then go to the next slide, please. And in FY25, we add a firefighter to each shift. And now, as our expansion of the town grows in the center of town, I have the staff on hand to get. We have now fire prevention filled, captain position to oversee the groups with the 4 lieutenants and 4 firefighters. So 5 people on duty. We can run down to 4 and staff both ambulances. But in this scenario, if I have an ambulance, if they have back-to-back medicals at night, I still have someone at the fire station. Handle phone calls or another emergency that might require me to leave. So that is, that's my 3-year plan out in addition to capital. That's how I look to see this as to coincide with projected growth.
Well, thank you for that. You're gonna have to present this slide, obviously, to a new chief. You'll have to get on board.
Not a problem.
Right, might have different plans, so I think this is great for us.
It's just, I mean, just like capital, you kind of have to know.
Yeah.
What's coming, what are we projecting out? I mean, our service volume, I don't anticipate it going down. Not as the town grows. And I think the town grows coincides with the sewer. I think the town growth is not just the sewer is going to change. That's a whole different. That's just difficult.
On the captain's position, you mentioned that was part of the management team, but is that a labor position or is it management?
It's labor, but it's a union position.
Is that something that is discretionary or is that just how it plays out?
It's generally in any fire organization, it's a union position. It's a bargaining position. It would have to be bargained. Yeah. If we wanted to put it, like Anthony said, we'd have to go into negotiations to change that out.
And that's fine. I wasn't sure if that's what the rules were, then it just speaks to what the role would be there too. And it's not, if it's in the bargaining position that you're bargaining, but not really out of the management structure.
Well, but
I don't think manager was the correct
Yeah.
word. I think it's a supervisory position, so that happens then oversee the lieutenants who
Right.
oversee their shift, so it's more supervisory.
But you could also have a situation where, like again, the deputy leaves or is injured, he's out extended care with the chief, vice versa. Now the deputy, say the chief is out, chief leaves. Up goes the deputy to cover those on an interim basis, but responsibilities go down to the captain. And you still have the fire prevention person that's out there, the new chief, the new deputy, it doesn't have to work on that. That can all be, and that's what I mean by, I guess when I said the phrase, it's more to how do we keep things going without burdening one person.
No, I get that.
Right, but yeah, it does give and that would be, that's not a captain on each ship. That's for boards, 12, 15 years from now. This is a person who'd be there Monday through Friday. When I started in 08 as a career, it was Chief Carter, Captain Curdy, 4 of us, the captain, that's how our management structure was. And you do say have the lieutenants with 4, it's in the fire service, that's the span of control. And at this point also, but more importantly, with that staffing model, when the 2 ambulances are out, there's somebody still. That's like I said, over to one Sunday. You're just not going to have people, you can't rely on chief officers to be available every day. And you don't want mutual aid partners coming into town and no one's there. Sometimes it happens, but it's not good practice.
I don't want to push too much into the 25 budget or 26.
Yep.
This, appreciate this. I was just curious, was Captain McCurdy's position, was that in the
He was
CBA?
part of the bargaining.
It was, so.
Yeah, and then when Chief Wodzinski was hired, and then shortly thereafter, we went to 24 hours and expanded the department. You need those 2 people in command. You can't, You can't be talking about how we're gonna negotiate and the captain who's the second in command in the bargaining unit. You need that. That's where the deputy chief's
We used
position.
to routinely see org charts that included captains, as many as 60 firefighters, but those were the call firefighters.
Yeah, right, and now
We had
that's,
three different, three different.
we did, we had 3 different groups and the captain and deputy in each one and everything else. But again, not bargaining unit members.
Right.
Again, that was our bank for the buck for the town, is that we provided a service with community citizens, and it's just not feasible now, unfortunately.
Definitely something to share with the next chief.
Yep, sure. Bring he or her in. Do you want to work tomorrow? Okay, so, next slide, please. I think we'll get into some of our budgeting items. Here's looking at, our longevity is up because of some of the members are in the 10-year mark, changes there. So just basically highlighting some of the increases. We have the contractual raises, and also in there is the benefit, salary of our proposed fire prevention position. We also we're still in labor negotiations over the contract. So the salaries are what we estimate the increase to be.
Salaries are based on current.
Current CBA with steps. Yep. And also training, we have some required training, and members also have in the CBA the ability to go to 16 hours. So we can just put everything in there for training, including if they do take advantage of the 16 hours, the overtime is in there, and some required pump operator training. There's also training that's related to OSHA that we have to do. And last is our non-union longevity went down with Scott's retirement. So that's kind of our salary line items. Any questions on that?
I guess, my only question, I know this is definitely a CBA, with the education piece.
Okay.
I know in some other towns like Selbrd, there is a cap, and I don't think we currently have a cap, so just something to think about.
That should be
in
bargained. That would be
negotiating. Yeah,
bargained.
as we get larger, that number could get really out of hand.
So the education that you're seeing here is just their stipend, so that's just their education stipend. for
Okay,
CBA.
so it's
That's an expense.
Not going to school.
Yeah, that's the next slide that we'll get to that.
Yeah, but that's a good point, and we can, there's no questions on that. Yes, go ahead.
And the overtime is assuming that you get the fire prevention officer as a position.
Plus, we base the overtime on their benefits as well. Here, we know these 5 employees have this many weeks of vacation. These don't, we base it on that. Our overtime is based upon sick, personal, vacation, filling those spots
But with one additional person.
with an additional person. Yeah. And then on expenses, we're required yearly to do post testing of all our supply and attack lines. It can be a challenge trying to get it completed when they're also going through emergencies. So we looked at in our professional services fire, we added some money in there to have a company come in and do it. It's just going to be so much easier to document it. It's really peaceful. It was cool when I started. You sent out an email saying, hey, we want to come in on Saturday, help with host testing today. Yeah, you got 6 people. Now the group starts at 8 o'clock and they come back at 4. And then it's just not getting done. So, and it's not big money, but it accounts for an increase in that line item. And the training is what you're talking about, Gary. So that increase is there per the collective bargaining agreement. By September 1st, a bargaining member that wishes to continue their education has to submit to the chief. I'm going to take a course, and here's the cost. Per the CBA, the town has to pay for that, and that was, again, as we've been with Anthony and Joe and Chuck, the current collective bargaining agreement has items that were when the bargaining unit was part of Acton's bargaining unit. It's just, some of it is when it was a small department and it wasn't, it didn't sound alarms, and now that the department's growing, it's something that, I think it's important to have in there to encourage our.
Oh, absolutely. I do
agree, there needs to be a.
Something, because it is something we're talking, adding positions later on, the department's gonna get bigger and bigger. That number needs to look at while still promoting education for sure, the balance.
And then, building maintenance, so we increased, so the machine that fills our air bottles requires twice yearly maintenance. And also, we have a system that captures the exhaust when the trucks are started, and it's a hose that attaches and takes it out the door, and then the hose releases, and that needs yearly maintenance. So that was, and fire supplies went down, after we met our second meeting with Alicia, where we were trying to look at ways to decrease the budget across the town. Where could we get, and we took some things out to help with the budget. Wasn't that to get the budget aligned townwide. So we sat down with Sean and Alicia and said, okay, what can come out, what can we move, waiting on a year, and that's why that line item was down. And EMS supplies, I decreased because during the pandemic, we were able to get a lot of supplies free, right? So we have items that normally we would buy that right now we have a surplus of, so EMS supplies was as well. So that's our salary and expenses profile for fiscal 23. Questions? Next slide. We get into our part of the responsibility of the fire chief is the emergency management director. And as such, we have a tremendous group of volunteers here in town that known as the Littleton Volunteer Corps, but actually they're the Citizens Emergency Response Team. A couple years back, the board decided to give them a budget to help them with buying supplies and some training that's required. These people are 20 plus members now under the guidance of former Chief Alexander McCurdy and his board of directors. This group is fantastic. You know, we formulated it. We actually volunteered, Alex. You didn't even know he was going to be in charge, but back in 15 or 16, he came in and the group really, it was hard the first few years. There was no need, and we don't get a lot of natural disasters, unfortunately. You know what I mean?
That changed.
Yeah, and then the pandemic came, and they organized and assisted at regional clinics in Foxborough, in Devens, where these volunteers, some with healthcare backgrounds, but basically greet you, park you, take care of the paperwork, assist, you know, and it even went over to some of the clinics we've had in town and continue to have vaccination clinics. They help with the road race. They're really good at traffic control. You know, they can go out there and assist Chief Bernard with what doesn't really require an officer, but they've just been fantastic. And actually, their meetings on Wednesdays, they meet once a month on Wednesdays. They're actually a nice group. They all get along pretty well. So it's refreshing to see in this day and age that there still is volunteerism. Next slide, Judy. And you know, they're budget wise. You see 1,500 in wages. The wages are for who we have to bring in to do the training, not for the membership. And also supplies. They're constantly their shelter operations. For instance, one of their main focus has been the vaccination clinics. But really, if we did have a natural disaster that required the evacuation of a portion of town, they can set up a shelter at any of the schools. Well, they can set up a shelter. They can, down to keeping track of your medications, your pets, they have it all. They have the paperwork, they're trained in it, they now have tablets, and it would be seamless. All they need is the fire department to tow their trailers to the facility. And then from there, they have cots, dog kennels. It's incredible. And they drill on us, and they work with regional partners. And they really, the board of directors of that group is, as emergency management director, he just says, I just have to run it by you. Here's what we're thinking of doing. It's not a burden on the chief right now. It's a testament. It really, they don't get the recognition they deserve, but they're pretty.
We're also specially trained to do firefighter rehab if we had an extended scene or something like that. They could come in and help out with those types of things, take the burden off the department itself, right there, specialized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they do it all volunteer, so they do several hours a week.
Love to get them to recognize them, even if not.
Well, we did.
You did.
We
You
did.
did. It felt
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, the room's too small. You can't get them all in.
I mean, yeah, it was just interesting, and I wouldn't have known about this. unfortunately, silly me, I don't know how many others that, and I've seen these people working, but I didn't realize.
They go to Thursday, they'll
Besides being
they'll
online,
do whatever's asked of them, they're willing to help.
Great.
And that's a
No, it's
great thing to have. And I believe that's it, too, right? That's it. That's our presentation for FY23.
Question about the survey.
Yes.
There's knows a lot of grant money available. Is that anything that Alex or?
Yeah,
or
Alex
have
and his
applied
board
for?
directors, there's one of his directors, Pat Tolley. She's how long is it dispatcher? She works for Harvard Police, but she's very active. She's active at Harvard as a cert, and Pat stays on top of that. So we do get any grants they can apply, they apply.
They actually just got one that received 2 tablets, so now they can do inventory management, they can do scene management, they can do all kinds of different things that these tablets are basic.
Including that, they can keep track of the people at the clinics. They use that software there. It was the sad thing was not sad, yeah, their software wasn't compatible with some of what we were doing here in town, but that company's brought that up. But they definitely are very active in finding sources of revenue. Matter of fact, I gave them a spot in the basement of the fire station. They're actively selling. So, but all within their budget. So thank you very much for coming in this morning, unless there's any more questions. Come on, Marilyn, you must have a question.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
No, thank you for your time this
Not a
morning.
question, but I think it's worth stating, this is your first and apparently your last opportunity to present to us, and you took the helm and obviously in most inauspicious circumstances last year with the chief of police's retirement in the middle of the COVID, and we haven't missed a beat. You're under a heck of a lot of stress, but as the clients of your good work, I'd say we're not feeling that heat, and that's we know you and your department, you folks have done a great job, and we're going to be filling that spot sooner rather than later as chief, but the town certainly hasn't suffered for a loss, and that's great kudos to you, Don.
Thank you very much. No, it's all things. Relatives, but also, the men and women that serve, they do the job. And it was a tough year, but we also, as I always said, the town's always supportive, always. And that's the name. We don't lack. The town's always stepped up and helped us out. We appreciate that. So thank you very much. Thank you for serving on the board. Thank you very much.
Bear that on you.
All right. Next up, we have DPW, Mr. Stoddard now. They get ready. Thank you for coming in this morning. Our 10 o'clock briefing, we're a little early, which we love. Mr. Stoddard, appreciate you hanging on by thread here. Perhaps your last
We'll see.
budget.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you.
Morning, thank you for having this. Not everybody knows this is Ashley, she's our business manager. She helped me put this together, so I think it makes sense to have her here. Plus it's sort of emergency. As I'm transitioning out, she's taking more responsibility. We can go through the operating or the capital. Which one do you guys want to talk about first?
Whatever you like.
Perfect. So if you guys have your books, it's actually page 113. We can start with the operating. I guess the biggest takeaway here is the $119,000.
We're good.
Most of that is in roadway repair monies, but a good portion of that actually came out of the transfer station, specifically because we purchased the roll truck. So, but we can go through the highlight expenses. So, salaries, wages went up approximately $44,000. It's all kind of actually obligated increases. So we don't really know kind of what it is. We go down into expenses. What we tried to do this year is reallocate some of our monies into line items that made more sense and kind of get rid of redundant line items. So you can see a few of them like training and other supplies we've removed and just reposition those monies into like advertising and education. Places that we use it every year and always go negative within that line item. And we just tried to kind of make it make more sense. One of the big ones we did increase was technology supplies and license renewals. Technology supplies is, we have a new timekeeping system this year. It's all digital, it's on the computer and on the phone. So that price went up, so we had to incorporate that into the budget. And then license renewals, every year it seems to fall. One year it's a little less. Last year it was only $1,500. It's just the way that the staff license renewals come up. So we look at every one every year. And this is a specific, that's exactly how much. Other than that, like I said, we went up $7,000, but it's pretty standard. Anybody have any questions on this section?
Any questions on the wages and expenses stuff?
Right? Okay, page, go to 115. So transfer station, we, as you can see, like I said, we lowered, we went down $29,000 total in transfer station. And most of that is within the hauling expenses. We did have a relatively favorable contract, so we were able to reduce our tipping fees in pretty much every category this year.
Is that a yearly contract or is that?
It's a yearly price.
Yearly.
Yeah, it's just this one year. Oh, so we did a 3-year contract.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so it's, the only variable usually is in recycling expenses, because that's open market. This year, we've been, honestly, killing it in recyclables, but it's starting to now creep back up cost-wise. So, but, like I said, you can still see.
So what's the dynamic there?
It's market rate, so.
But why is it, right now, just?
Well, so during COVID, for some reason, everybody wanted product. So what happens is Waste Management hauls it for us. Well, actually, we haul it to the disposal facility. They sort it, and then it's however, if they have a high demand for cardboard, then we end up not having to pay for it. If they have a low demand and they can't find it, then they have to pay more to get rid of it. Same thing with plastics bottle. So it's, I don't understand why the dynamic changes, but it's 1 month we actually didn't pay at all for what we hauled.
2 months, you had no fees at all.
And then the next month it was $1,000. So it's completely hit or miss. I don't understand the market on it, but I'll take it when we can get it. We actually called them because we were like, why haven't we built it? And they're like, we haven't had to. I was like, oh, cool. So, yeah, I don't understand the market. I wish I did. Wish I could kind of, I guess, it'd be easier that way. Yeah, so I don't know, anybody have any questions on the transfer station?
Did they give you any kind of report, like, you know, what's usable, like, for example, people putting things in the wrong bin, and that's costing us money, you know, something we can bring to the town to show them that these areas, you know, we're not recycling properly, can save us more money?
Yeah, no, everything is actually, we sort here, but everything goes to a single stream facility.
Okay.
So while we sort it, it's really only for, we could convert everything to single stream here, because once it goes there, it all gets dumped on the same floor, it goes to the same conveyor belt. And it's all based on just percentages. So we don't, it's not that we're recycling wrong or anything like that. It's just purely what the market is. The reason we haven't combined everything into single stream here is just, it's easier for the residents. They know where to dump everything now. It's kind of just this way. So we can switch to 116 is the Parks Department. The budget for expenses, we left exactly the same. There. And you'll see almost a $15,000 decrease in the wages. That's from our parks foreman leaving. And we filled the position, but because he had been here so long, we were able to fill it at a lower had to contractually fill it out. And then the longevity dropped out too as well because he personally. That section. And then page 117 is roadway expenses. And then this is where you'll see the $127,000 increase. Everything above it, all the line painting, professional services, police details, and other supplies stay the same, and then the repairs.
Now talk to that, just, I guess, for anyone that might be listening. It's not that a road didn't get paved, you have to live on cycle to get paved, because what's that savings?
Yeah, that savings basically, so, 867, 15, 516 from 22. That had encumbrance. Okay, so we aren't asking for those additional funds. No. So we love it. I mean, if you want to give me the extra 127,000, you'd have to spend it, but we feel the 740 is an appropriate number that we can pay everything that we hold folks.
On schedule.
On schedule and on, and pretty much.
Just definitely wanted to talk to. That's,
Oh, yeah, no,
people love the thing, this time of year especially.
Yeah.
The potholes and everything.
Well, no, that's, we don't think.
Yeah.
And the more we pay, honestly, our pothole number, the amount of money we spent on potholes in the last 3 years, it dropped at least 50%. Because of how many.
Right.
And we're hoping, obviously, there are still bad roads. And then the snow and ice budget, we've got at the 200,000. The only difference you'll see is the allocation of 4,400, and that is just because contractually we've had to increase their snow stipends. But it's all we keep the bottom line. No, we have had to increase our rates on our contractors to retain them and actually bring some. But as far as our staffing goes, their salaries are basically. Yeah, it's got about right. No, we go over. But we don't increase the 200,000, which is then. Well, that we can have. 40 campus. So we keep the 200 here. We never. They've never been here. I've never seen it. But yeah, unfortunately, we try not to raise the rates too far. We stay competitive with the community like that. Yeah, it ends up all the time. I think. Probably. Yeah, we're probably out. So that's got pretty good. Super simple. So we can move to the capital. It's page 300 in the book, but there's no page numbers on the readings of what happened in the capital. Okay. So the first one is replacing the highway superintendent Steve Whitmer's pickup. 2011 now, you folks see in town, you'll see some fancy new black wheel fender flares. That's the passing tech. It's the body.
They've all been there.
Yeah. We really need to replace this truck. It's been a few years. I pushed this thing down just to use the burden on the capital. Earlier this year, Steve had to enter the vehicle from the passenger side because the driver's side door broke. Doesn't look all that great to the residents or climbing through the passenger door to drive the truck. So we're asking for 46,000 to replace that. The next truck is the replacement of our 93 Mac. So folks have been generous enough to give us 4 of the 6 we needed 4 years ago asked, set up and asked for 1 year, 6 years. This is number 5, super close now. We were originally, if you remember, 3 years ago, we were replacing the big trucks with in-kind big trucks. Then I made the decision that we didn't need a $300,000 6-wheel dump truck anymore, so I ended up dropping it to F-750s, which in essence cut the price in half. And just like I anticipated it happening, those prices have still crept up, but now we're still about $150,000 cheaper than a big truck. So I'm asking for another F-750. It's more than capable of what we're doing, actually doing. The crews really love it. It's a mid-sized big truck. Need solves correctly. There's no mobile truck. So it is $200,000, but for what we use it for, what we get out of it, I think it's well worth it. The other item we're asking for is $10,000 for major equipment and repairs. This item, I love this item because if we need to, obviously we need to fix something, if the transmission breaks, if we got one of our trucks, a spring broken, unanticipated, just don't know what's going to happen. The reason I like to keep this in the capital as opposed to going as operating, it keeps me from having to hedge against repair. Where if it's an operating, I get nervous that we have. Sometimes we've had to fix a truck. We had to fix a plane. It was $18,000. I was able to use 2 years. Saw it coming, so we kind of saved it up. Where if it was in the operating budget, I would end up buying parts that I may never use. Hedge against having to have if I didn't have that cash. That's the reason I like this in capital. It's very important budget thing for us. I know it's number 2 on my list. But
Yeah, no, seeing it caught my eye because I know we had moved some of these repair maintenance out of capital.
Yeah. I mean, this is
So the other department, so this you
would
give
be
an
more.
explanation of why.
Yeah, I mean, because in the end, if this guy moves to operating and we have this in the end of the year, I would consider buying a transmission. Just because what if it broke and I lost this money and then next year, the frame or spring broke and the transmission. Well, now I'm really, now we have to run by a truck. Where keeping this in the capital, you don't ever spend it maliciously, you spend it on the right things.
Yep.
Yeah, done that. So that's one of the big reasons why I think this. Incredibly important. The next one is for our parks department. So since our last parks foreman left, I asked a new parks foreman to kind of go through the whole department, figure out what you need, what makes sense, what could you, basically what the wish list is. This mower came to the top. It's a 2009 Kubota, replacing 0 turn. The 2009 Kubota that we have now, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's cost us thousands of dollars. The drive motors, everything else. So
Everyone that's looking, I know everyone's kind of finding this in the book and it's a little hard. The packet also has all the capital requests towards the back. It's, I think it is the last page. Second to last page. So a little bit easier to follow along.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just looking at people around.
So it's just upgrading an existing mower that's costing. Try that obviously.
Yeah.
It's just a check. And then the last one, I would call it a want, but kind of more of a wish. Cut something. The last, if you remember, would be one I would cut if I have to. What we have started doing, or the reason we're asking this, it's a 2001, so it's a number of years old now. But what we've started to do is we've moved to grooming the beach. So, and the baseball fields and everything else. So we added some more use to the machine. 2001, so it's not yet. It doesn't cost, we've had to fix it. We haven't had any major repairs on it yet, but at some point it's going to happen. We fix it at the beach, we use it now. Before we were only grooming the beach twice a week, so I made a decision that maybe it's just. Obviously, this goes down. That. Sorry, it's a want more than a need. That was it. Any questions?
No, look at you.
Last question, yeah, Chris. The, how is that outfitted? You just had the fire department came with a 1 ton.
That's fully outfitted, that's everything on it, lights, windows, plow, like fire. Everything right.
46 grand is the moment.
No. That's a conversation, yeah. I don't know. Disparity between two trucks.
I mean, this is fully out.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we are going to squeeze in here, commentary.
So we have more than a couple of people. We'll move a table. If you guys want to take a couple minute break while
We
we.
can take a minute, well, yeah, if anyone needs it. So this is, Mr. Bailey, Ivan,
Huh?
we're gonna, brought, and Andrew, we brought all the heavy hitters.
Yeah,
Our whole boys. We're gonna take a quick break. 3 to 5 minutes. Welcome back. We have cemeteries, Carolyn, Andrew, DC, and Ivan.
Yes,
Thank you for coming down this morning.
thank you for having us.
Cold Saturday.
We,
We've been discussing the cemetery department budget.
board put together a brief slide deck, kind of just go over what we do and some of the financials, a little bit of history.
Sometimes. Sucks the life out of it. I'm sorry. Just the
Okay, so, cemetery department, in case anybody does not know, we maintain both West Lawn Cemetery and the old burial ground. Together, that comprises, about 71.5 acres of property, with over 21 acres of actual, grave, property use. Our offices are at West Lawn, and they're housed in one building that has both our maintenance garage and the offices. That building was constructed in 1993. And as most of you are aware, West Lawn provides our final stop during our annual Memorial Day parade, and we work with the veterans on flag placements as well. Staffing. What we have a TC here, our cemetery superintendent, and a groundskeeper. Our operating budget, $120,709 for salaries, with $17,500 maintenance budget. So some of the things that we've been working on recently, of course, the large one was the expansion of 1 acre of the 15 acres that Hartwell family donated to the town graciously, and we got town meeting approval to expand, which was completed in the fall as far as the expansion. Now we're working towards layout design, marking graves for the future opening for sales. We had a string of bad luck with large trees that became diseased and had to be removed. We actually worked with the light department on some of the ones that were actually potential issues for electrical lines, but majority of them we had to end internal. We're going to have to come up with a plan of replacement, and that will be part of our overall landscaping moving forward. We also completed columbarium and the associated landscaping with that. That's for cremations, and we've started to sell on those as well.
That's correct.
Yes. And lastly, one of the efforts that people may not be aware of, it's been ongoing for 5 years now, is we're restoring old gravestones and markers. Started at the old burial ground, and this year we have transitioned over to West Lawn. Working with CPC, historical mission, and they've been great to work with, and providing CPC funds for that. Do about 17 to 20 a year. And it's a meticulous process, but anybody who would love to come down and take a look, even during the process, get a hold of TC. It's pretty fascinating on how that works. That's going to continue as long as CPC is around. We hope we're going to continue that restoration.
I had a quick question on the removal of the trees. So I know in town common, maybe some here at the board, we had, who removed
Those
those?
are diseased.
Who removed those diseased trees? So is that something that is that even a possibility that we would utilize highway?
I mean, they would have to, I would
Is that
imagine.
a contract?
Contract out, yeah, so we do the same thing.
It's the same.
Right, right, yeah, exactly, yep. Next slide, I just wanted to put in our current pricing schedule. People an idea of the fees that we do charge. One thing we did during last year was we undertook a analysis of our fees as compared to surrounding cemeteries in the area. Were there things that they were doing differently, or how competitive are we? Or is there room to do any modifications? And what we found, which surprised me, because I thought there was going to be room, that there really isn't. We're charging about what Acton and Westford, what these cemeteries are charging. There's some tweaking we could do, little tweaks here and there. We're going to be discussing that going forward. Some possible other funerals on days that we don't offer today that we might be able to do at a surcharge. So there will be some tweaks that we'll look at, but there's nothing drastic in there that's going to make major changes. Financials. Yep, okay. So I just want to give an idea, last several fiscal years, what we have for revenue. And two categories of revenues are plot sales and then actual grave openings. So we do around 50 funerals a year on average. And you can see that dollar-wise, we're in the low 50s. We did have a bump last year, mainly due to sales. I don't know, with COVID, people start thinking differently. So we did get a bump there, but on average, maybe around 60,000 is a number. Might be the target year to year. Certainly, we may get a bump when we open up the new section, but again, it's normalized. We don't want to use high numbers as something projecting the future. Also, our perpetual care account. That's our balance through the end of last year, December 31st. And again, I identified the amount of funerals that we handle. Now, as far as capital for this year, there were two items. We have a trailer that needs replacing. How old is that trailer?
The trailer is a 1999.
1999. That is in need of replacing. I have to say, TC does a wonderful job of maximizing the use out of equipment that the town graciously allows us to purchase. One other major item that we're looking at in capital is we're going to look at an assessment of the building. And we want to do that assessment because our board wants to have, a 5-year outlook. We want to be able to present to select board and Fincom, hey, here's our 5-year plan. And the building is one thing. If there are issues with the building, we want to understand those issues and then plan for it down the road and not have an 11th hour request. Okay. So we're looking to do that assessment this year. And then, by next year, this time, we're going to have a 5-year capital plan. We'll be looking at. So, requested need. So right now today, as I explained, we have superintendent and a groundskeeper. We are in a position right now, though, where we only have TC working at the cemetery right now. So we are actually in a situation that if something happened to TC tomorrow, we could not support funerals for the community or at large. Right? important to understand. What we're asking to look at is adding positions for this coming fiscal year and have that position have similar skill sets to what TC does. Right now, TC can go on vacation, but he's not really on vacation. His level of experience and what he brings to this picture, we don't have another TC. Okay, so as I indicated, he does phenomenal amount of work, great work in supporting the community and population at large. So if we can get this position, it gives a backup, and it allows us to get to projects we haven't been able to get to. We don't have the staffing. The maintenance is growing, we're expanding, but we can't keep up with what we have. So I took a look at, what other cemeteries, what do other cemeteries do? Similar to ours. And, looking in the area, in Acton and Westford, as an example. So Acton has 3 cemeteries, they're larger. But they have a land use director, and that his role is more than just cemetery director, but they have a superintendent, an admin, and 4 maintenance staff. Westford has 5 cemeteries, they're smaller. They did, in FY20, they did 43 funerals, very similar, 30 acres, very similar to us. They have a director, a supervisor, admin, and a maintenance person. So that kind of gives you a flavor, what other cemeteries in the area are doing and how they're staffing to support what they have. So, sure.
The position you're talking about is not filled into the numbers.
Right. Yep. And it's, we're just at a situation, and we apologize that this is coming now, but things have changed staffing wise recently.
You're looking for somebody between the superintendent and the
Correct. Yep.
Would be considered an assistant.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, yeah.
No.
Okay. I'm glad that you brought that to our attention. It makes perfect sense to me personally, that there needs to be succession, there needs to be some sort of additional staffing to this department, especially given the comparisons to what the amount of acres of land compared to other communities, as well as the services that you're providing, and growing need and whatever. It certainly does not make any sense, for us there, right? If something happens to CC tomorrow, we have a big problem on it.
There's no problem. Correct.
So thank you for bringing this to us now.
I just added that we have a problem on here right now. I mean,
Right.
it's a 2-person department.
Right.
With a headache waiting to happen, and it happened.
Right.
And I've always been amazed that we've been able to get as much done as well as you guys have done it on that staffing profile, knowing other departments nearby are starting to like double the number of employees.
Yeah.
And
That's credited to TC.
yeah, I get it, and all of you, but principally decent, of course. But the other part that you haven't spoken to, I think it's worth mentioning. Mine might say, well, some of this is seasonal, some of it's not. But of course, sure, there's lawns to mow in the summer and leaves to rake in the fall, but there's snow to plow and shovel in the winter too.
Right.
The other part, if you elaborate on that, but also elaborate on to the extent that you can already, there's already a lot of support from other departments to the extent that you're able to do it, right? I mean, I know you interact and you get aid, both material, whatever else, maybe you could talk to how that's already being done and what were the limitations to that.
We've been really lucky that in both the light and water department as well as the highway department, whenever we ask them for support, they deliver the best they can. And sometimes in the last minute kind of fashion. We had a tire blow. They called me to the grave not too long ago, and I called the light department. Within 45 minutes, they had a truck up there that was suitable, so I could just move that one to the side, finish digging the grave, and then deal with the flat tire, which was greatly helpful. And the highway department's been helpful whenever they can. They loan us the jackhammer unit so we can get through the frost. They gave me some road closed signs for a couple of roads that were just impassable with ice and frozen water. As well as some mechanical support comes from them too, from time to time, when they can. They're pretty stretched pretty thin too, but they're as helpful as they can. So without that support, we would have really had some jams in the last 3 or 4 years.
And the one thing we can't predict is funerals. That's the thing. So we, winter, spring, summer, just don't know. Interesting statistic, through COVID, that you told us about cremation for burials. That we had.
Yeah, before the pandemic, we were doing more, for 3 consecutive years, we were doing more cremation than full burial. And I don't know if it has something to do with the pandemic or not, but that situation changed. Now it's more full burials. I think it might be because people who choose cremation can then choose to wait until they can get their families together and friends can have a celebration of life all together. There's not a sense of urgency where full burial, you have to just keep moving right to your funeral.
I guess administratively, is HR, is there been any discussion of the position description or anything? That even been discussed yet?
There's been some very preliminary conversations, nothing nailed down, like degree detail.
Man is thinking that TC really can't take vacations. Now, is that true that because of your position, you have to be around sometimes, you really can't take a true vacation or leave?
Well, I've only gone for a whole week once, and there were a couple phone calls, which wasn't the end of the world to me, but
No, I just think it's,
He carries his phone wherever he goes. Yeah.
but I usually, so far, just out of a, I guess you'd say, a sense of anxiousness or eagerness, I just
He
keep my
cares.
vacation short,
He cares.
and I stay as close as I can in case I need to get back.
Retiring something part-time, an option, or is that not?
We talked about a temporary situation, and there is some traction on that. I've emailed HR a general job description for that. There's been some conversation about that. And also, pre-pandemic, we were approved for a seasonal person, such as a college kid. But then when the pandemic happened, the college kids weren't being hired by other departments of the town, so we just kind of, that sort of ended up in the back burner and hasn't been revisited yet. But I'd like to revisit it sometime soon.
Part of the issue with the part-time is we need a lot of certifications to the type of equipment that they have to, it's so it's hard to get somebody who's part-time to do all the functions.
And neither of those, and those folks that legitimately bring up that when we had those, in fact, they wouldn't address the situation in dealing with right now.
Right, right. Yeah,
So I couldn't stand in.
right.
Is there any precedent for sharing position with other towns, like some other, departments have?
We actually asked about that at a board meeting because we were in a pinch and we reached out to one of the.
I borrowed a jackhammer from Acton once to get to the cross from the highway department started.
But staffing wise,
Without someone who could fill in for you if you wanted.
That's not, I don't imagine that's impossible, but it's complicated. There have to be someone who knows more about the accounting than me to answer that.
and has to know the cemetery, has to know, you don't want to take the chance of somebody coming in. Because they're the face of Westlawn, the face of, I look at it as an extension of what we take customer service and how we proceed in the area. Very serious. So,
And the person, a step-in person, would have to know how to read the software and locate the appropriate location. There would definitely be some training. What's the long term use of the?
wow, the long-term use.
Well, to maintain the ground, so I don't see it being these heavily impacted projects, having the building itself, but if there is an emergency, if something, if you have to be the minor upgrade to the mayor or some other service that we have done on the property, for that, but I don't see it being used heavily in the future, ideally. We really avoid trying to get into that just because of its nature, but
So for instance, how many years ago, taking funds out of the trust fund to offset some of the budget?
Yeah.
That's something that we could dip into to capitalize. Or at least the feasibility.
That's a possibility. Yeah, we're open to discussions on that. Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a maintenance, maintenance dollars assigned in this year. For instance, we had a tree that had to come down that was dropping branches around the gravestone. And if we reach a point where, all right, we don't have enough funds to go to professional care, that's what it's here for. All right, we're going to professional care. We've got to get this done. You can't wait 6 months until it gets.
You're getting it revolving. I'm talking about the trust. The $700,000.
Right, yeah, no, but, right, what I'm saying is we could have access to that. If we had a situation where we expended and we don't have any money left. Something bad happens and we don't have money left in our operating, we don't have money left. That's an option to tap in.
And out of the sales that we do.
Yep.
Some of that project we go into the trust fund, et cetera, that done that recently.
Yes.
It was.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty simple, those things.
We do that once a year. Yep. Yep. Like to save.
Yes, we do. Man after my own heart.
Yeah.
Was that the end?
That was the end.
Oh, okay.
I do 2 shows, 7-11.
Any other questions for you?
Do you have an amount for the new position? I don't see it, maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see it.
No.
It was a new request.
It's a new request, so I think the range is somewhere around $31 an hour.
And you would like to have that this year?
Yes. Yep.
Found that additional to the other business, like this.
You're right. Yep.
The presentation didn't speak to capital requests that Steve just referring to a moment. Do you mind speaking of those a little bit?
So I did touch upon the 2 items, the trailer,
Oh, right.
the trailer and the building feasibility. And our plan is
Remind me again of the building.
the building assessment. It's your building assessment. So
We're on that.
we're gonna have somebody come in, look at that whole, look at the whole building and make recommendations on things that down the road may need updating, replacement, roof, the facade, the outside facade, lighting,
Yeah.
plumbing.
I know it's in our capital budget plan, but,
What's the number?
I don't love it. What's the number on it?
25,000.
Okay, all right, that's not,
Right, and then what, we're thinking is we're gonna get information back and we're gonna put that in towards our 5-year capital. We also have other items coming up down the road, trucks, that we see at some point. So we wanna be able to present your spreadsheet, work with Sean, right, and Anthony, Joe.
I'm sorry, clarification. You said 25,000 for the assessment or 25,000 for both of the capital items?
No, 25,000 for the assessment, it was 15,000 was the request for a trailer.
Okay, so that's different from what's in the budget book, is that right? I see 25 total for cemetery in the budget book.
25 total?
Yeah. 10 and 15. It was 15 for
Okay.
So it is 25.
All right, tried to get an input. All right. See, you're saving money already.
Good job. This is why the battery was running low.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. Well, thank you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Shovel. All right. We are staying ahead, which is wonderful. We do have a few of the school committee members with us. The chair and the vice chair, Matthew March, Justin McCarthy, are here to share their capital budget and operation budget request for the year. Thank you for coming forward.
Thanks for having us.
Are you expecting anyone else?
Good answer.
All right, fantastic.
Well, I have that same shirt, and I almost wore it today, and I'm glad I did it.
Are you representing you?
Okay, so, we actually,
I'm a jacket, I don't care.
we had some, good news, I think, for our budget request. Our original request, projection back in the fall was 920,493, added on to the 2022 fiscal year budget for a grant. So grant total was last year was $22,590,000. We're projecting a proposed budget for fiscal year 2023 of $23,050,247, just over 2%. So again, we had due to the reduction in out-of-district costs, due to creating an in-house bed program, students who would be attending an out-of-district placement can now be served within house programs. This has resulted in approximately $400,000 per year savings. There's also been changes to special education circuit breaker calculations. So as approved with the Student Opportunity Act, the circuit breaker reimbursement now includes a portion of special education transportation costs that have never been included before. This resulted in Littleton receiving an additional $137,000 in reimbursement for transportation costs in the current year, fiscal year 22. These funds will be used in fiscal year 2023. So this would be a one-year adjustment to the school annual request. We would expect a projected increase for the fiscal year 2024 year to mirror the previous increases, which range between 3 and 5% annually. So as far as our capital request go, we are requesting that the town set aside $450,000 for a Shaker Lane school feasibility study. These funds could come for the budget surplus the school returned to the town at the end of last year of approximately $491,000. The Mass School Building Authority is still reviewing the FY 2021 applications. That decision should be out by March 2nd. If the Shaker Lane project is not selected this year, Littleton will need to reapply next year for the Shaker Lane school project. That deadline is April 29th this year. The only other major thing we're looking to do this year is the security system at the high school is the original system installed. When the building was open 20 years ago, we need to replace access and code panels, motion sensors, door sensors throughout the building. Estimated funds needed for the project is about $60,000. So our total request then would be $510,000 for our capital.
Now it's the largest budget in town. That's a pretty clean presentation because it's typically much more complex than it is this year. Right? I know you guys did a lot of work behind the scenes. There were some changes at the state level for certain. I just have a quick question on the transportation. We were hoping this would come. So the state is basically replenishing, or is it 100%? What we're talking about?
I think it's 70, 75
maybe of the transportation.
Okay. So And that is something that's not going away. That's in the current budget for next year, and it looks like something that the state has finally decided
To
to.
my knowledge, it's.
Yeah. We would just say that that's legislative risk. You know,
Yes, right,
so
okay, sure.
we're able to put that in this year. In the
Those costs-
event, in the event that we lose some of those calculations.
Yeah.
You know, we might be back looking for a 3 to 5% as we have in years past, but
So-
it's changed in our favor, we're looking for less.
Yeah, okay. I know that's a significant piece of the budget every year that we look at. That's actually really good. There's actually a lot of good news from you guys this year.
Yeah,
I know the board, when I saw some of the numbers, or at least I was very pleased that obviously some of the federal money has come down, which helps the community, but also the state side also through, as well as your stewardship. So any questions on, this hasn't changed, this request, I think we saw, the select board saw over the last few months for the feasibility study. The tricky part with it, obviously, is putting it into a capital this year is, like you had just mentioned, but if we don't come up, now we're kicking it. And our capital needs to be cash. So there was some discussion, we'll have to have this discussion afterwards. Potentially a different stabilization for that, if that's what we decide to do. That money, just so it's protected, if it doesn't happen until 25, or 20, that's also. So like you guys.
We had applied last year,
Yeah.
and we were not selected, so Kelly and Steve feel that, you know, Littleton's time is coming soon. So we're optimistic that it could be this year. And if so, we want to be ready.
Yeah, and the timing worked out well, just budgetarily. But I actually want to open up questions, that's a big budget.
I don't think it's lost on any of us that it went so smoothly. That's one change that's really happened. It's, former chairman Fontanilla.
Just saying.
I am not gonna go there.
Could you just give us your final number again?
so the final number for $23,050,247. Increase of 460,000 from the FY22.
Yeah, and that gives extreme flexibility with the rest of the capital.
Yeah, and this is as much for doing audience, agent, 3 points I was hoping to elaborate on. One is, whatever starting point you want, yes this year or yes in a future year, what is the timeline on the implementation of the Shaker project? And secondly, particularly encouraged to hear that you're able to do some more with moving some of the spent costs in-house, and saying that without a great knowledge of what challenges are there for years, happening it's taking place, curious about the details. And then thirdly, since it speaks to both projected year and then ongoing years, what the enrollment projections look like for the system.
As far as your first question on Shaker Lane, obviously, the first step would be getting the feasibility study. Shaker Lane has been there. It's definitely the one building in town that needs the most work. We're not really strong in projecting what all the new developments will be coming in and what kind of numbers we want to plan to make sure that we'll be able to service all these students that are, at Shaker Lane. We may come to the conclusion that the feasibility study that we can put an addition on Shaker Lane, or maybe be looking at creating a whole new building. As far as the timeline on that goes, I wouldn't be clear on what that is until we have the feasibility study done. But I'm projecting in the next 5 years, we're looking at making significant changes. Second part of the question was spent.
Yes. In-house program.
So, I'm a special ed teacher in Waltham. And I can tell you that the cost of out-of-district placement for students, that's a major
cost, and it just keeps going up. Every year, one student can cost you up to $150,000 a year. Now, that's on average, probably average $70,000-$80,000. So the more students that we can service in-house, that's gonna contribute to our savings. In the smaller school districts like Littleton, being able to do that and running some of the programs, I think that's a major step forward.
What are you doing? I'm just curious.
So basically, some of our program students with more severe disabilities, autism spectrum, cognitive delays, we're able to service those within the school. Bigger, more classrooms there. Teachers specifically addressing those. So students have previously we weren't able to service in district, we had to pay for the other district costs. Dr. Clenchey is working on putting together more classrooms, community hiring new staff to deal with that.
So it's both infrastructure and hiring, you know.
Eventually, the hiring, but
Right, we're just able to perform those same services that students were receiving out of district, in district, and we needed some efficiencies there to be able to put the program in place. And we're there at this point. Through Superintendent work.
And that's great. I mean, I've always been advocating. Wondered why I couldn't be doing more. Credit to you all for doing the job.
and I think that your last question had to do with the numbers.
Yeah.
Right now, we're expecting them to remain stable. Like I said, what we see coming out is some of these developments in town, families moving in. You might see, but right now, we're projecting pretty stable.
That's just a year ahead, or do you have it going on a few years?
Couple of years. Yeah.
Some sort of updated study would likely be helpful.
Yeah.
If I recall, kindergarten class is the largest class right now. We have K through 12, so that's going to be a trend where we're going to start seeing maybe more younger families move into Littleton because it's so desirable, thanks to everyone's work. It's something that we need to be keeping an eye on because we don't want to have a study performed and break ground and find out that we're obsolete in a couple of years. So there'll be a lot of work that goes into Shaker Lane study and the redesign of that school.
So that may be a component of that process, do a more
Absolutely.
refined.
Yes.
Great.
Part of feasibility. But right now, we're projecting 16, I think the total student population is 1,600.
That's current right now.
Yeah,
It's been there for
exactly. So that's a decade.
The budget book has percentage changes for the last 5 years. It's about 1%, all up through 2020, and then in 2020, it's negative 6% for some reason.
That was what people were taking their kids out, but saying it, a lot of kids went to private school last year because they wanted more in person. Homeschool.
But the actual number of students is within 50 of 1,600 for the last 6 years. Very stable.
Can you just talk a little bit about the federal funding that you've received after the COVID? What's being spent and is it something that is going to be back in a couple of years? How much budget is-
So it's not something that I would say, so we have received some funding that's helped out with some of the costs, but it's not sustainable. We really need to
I mean, we had
some of the more specific, so that
we used a lot of money for the PPE, but have a filters in all the classroom. We had a study performed on the HVAC systems. Thank goodness those were in good working order. So we were able to take COVID specific money and use it likely for COVID specific causes. And we, for the most part, didn't really have to put in any ongoing expenses that are not going to be sustainable once the COVID money disappears. Okay. So that was nice. It was a nice fit. Many of the buildings were in good shape to begin with, and there's one over there. All the classrooms got those filters. So,
I just like to congratulate the board and Steve for putting this budget together, saving the town some money and looking at ways to save the town money.
Great. Talked to Quincy and Steve put a lot of hard work and we're up in the basement, but they're the ones really crunching the numbers behind the scenes. And, they've done a lot, so we're really pleased with being able to come in and do a pretty limited request for next year, being able to cut that request in half. We're pretty proud of that, so.
And even when there was just a discussion of these numbers potentially being this good, you guys were on top of it pretty early in the year. In the summer, we were here and you guys were really looking to see, we held some meetings. So I really appreciate that. I guess the only thing that's bewildering to my mind is all of the construction is not equating to children. And I really think somehow we have to get a study done to see if that's real or, I mean, but you're saying it really hasn't affected it. It's just a bizarre thing that all of these developments are equated to that. And whether IBM property changes some of this, that's not
Well, I think
really
it's a
designed.
cycle though. Students
Yeah.
cycle in and cycle out, and as they get older, they have other options to go to school. They go to the tech, they go to a private school. I
Yeah,
think it always fluctuates.
yeah, I think eventually you're gonna see some increase down the road. I don't think it's gonna remain at this level forever, but
What's our capacity?
it is a little bewildering. I would agree with you. I mean, but I've seen it, you know, growing up in Littleton. I don't know, Cindy grew up in Littleton, or Cindy, in the 1980s, the classes were ranging in the hundreds. When I graduated in the 90s, my class was 65 kids. You see that it definitely goes in waves, and but I don't see us going below 100 per class anytime soon. I would think it's only likely to increase as more developments are put in town. But the other thing I will say is, people are coming into town and they're not having the same number of kids they used to have. You're seeing, people living in big houses with one kid. There's so many different factors to take into consideration, try to predict what it is, but it's strange. Logically, you think it's gonna increase, but we haven't seen that yet.
It also has some leeway of choice too.
Exactly, and we were able to fill extra seats with school choice. We get a lot of money. Students coming from air, we have a lot of students coming from air. And if that changes, we have to cut off those school choice seats and go that way just through the district. So we have a little wiggle.
And that was my next question, really. What is our flexibility? What is our capacity right now against what we have for a student body? You're right, we have, I mean, it's amazing how many out of district or that we school choice, thank you, that comes into town. So it's, but that's still not bringing us all the way up to capacity. I'm sure you'll need some flexibility as well.
So we saw Roman, like I said, it changes as far as how many kids we lose every year. Seventh grade is a big one where students start to go to Parker, and then obviously into ninth grade, you have kids going to the tech. So there's some attrition there, but I would say, when I went to Littleton High School in the 1990s, that's when they first started school choice. We were losing kids to school choice. Now we have Littleton is desirable, and we have the towns coming into Littleton. I know a lot of kids when I was in high school went to active Oxford because they thought that was but we're on the other side of the spectrum.
Of course, that equates more kids, equates to the school being larger, which equates to more teachers. That's why it's so important. So, great, thank you.
Yeah, I would just add that, as a household puts their children through the school system and then decides to stay in Littleton, they sort of, they occupy that house. So we need a new house to continue with enrollment. So the more desirable it is for folks to stay in town after they put their children through school, it calls for the new construction, I suppose, just to keep the school system at the same level that they're at. I think where you could have a large influx of students is if you have a very desirable school system and very affordable housing. If you have that combination, then all of a sudden you might see an influx of folks. But if we're just, taking a couple of students from neighboring towns, but people decide, geez, as opposed to moving into Acton on the side, I'll move into Littleton, it's not going to move the dial or the needle too much. Especially at some of the new construction home prices we're seeing. So people aren't, not for everyone. But I do think we're in a situation where we need to be cautious because we have an excellent school system. And if we bring on, housing options that range, there's a lot of affordable housing or housing that would be applicable to medium incomes, which is a good thing. It's just certainly something that the school system's gonna have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, in the first place, we're gonna see changes generally. Because of the younger families, and that's what feasibility studies can help us identify.
Timely.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
And if you've been there, like I said, Shaker Lane is the one building that has not changed significantly in a long time. So it's, like, when was that building? It was probably the late 60s. I think.
Check a line.
We all went there.
Oh, my. 1950, my dad was in the building.
Was that all I was gonna say?
It was made a major renovation.
Yeah.
And it's,
30
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's time. It's time to look at Shaker Lane. You know. We were able to, Russell Street's an older school also, but we were able to, it's pretty up to date as far as air conditioning and everything right now. That school, it sometimes is housed a lot more grades than it currently does, so we'll see what happens, but that would probably be next on our list, but obviously in the stage, but we can get Shaker Lane done in the next 5 years. I think would be.
Other questions? All right, well, that was great presentation. Just thank the rest of the board for us doing that.
Sure, thanks for having us.
Great work.
Thank you.
Pleasure to work with you guys.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much. I didn't even have to take my jacket off.
Oh.
Right, whatever.
If you like to.
All right. Time. I believe that pretty much finishes the presentation portion of the day. So we will be signing off as we get into our discussion for to iron all of this out and hopefully come to some type of a framework for going, getting this budget balanced and being good stewards to the community and the town as a whole. Thank you for spending time with us this morning, and we will see you in the future. Thank you.
Bye, Andrew.